Hey guys. Get superpowers with the new GeForce RTX 40 series cards. Super Edition. Alright, so I guess we will start a little bit earlier this evening. So we're going to go ahead and go through some of these articles here. So obviously the RTX 4070 Super is out and available. So we'll talk about that here at the start. And then there's a couple of other things I wanted to talk about. There's some interesting things around USB4, around Microsoft declaring 16 gigabytes as the minimum for computers, specifically for AI PCs. So basically, if you have a PC that has a AI processor or like an NPU, neural, whatever they call it, processor, Microsoft is mandating 16 gigabytes minimum. So we'll talk about that. USB 4 is on the horizon, like actual USB 4, not Thunderbolt 4. So we'll talk about that because I've been running into a lot of issues with this recently with, well, not just Asus, but mostly Asus. We'll talk. I have some things to say about that. And then Intel has stuff to talk about in terms of next-gen semiconductor fabs and China. Specifically, they call out China. So we will want to pay attention to that because that does have an impact on the ability to procure hardware, especially high-end hardware. So that's going to be the main discussion points. And then again, if anybody who's new to this channel, if you recently subscribed, we recently hit 9K subs earlier this week. So I now have 9,000 subscribers. And I started this channel, I kind of restarted the channel back around the time when the 4090 launched and when Intel's A770 launched. It was kind of around that time. So that was like a little more than a year ago at this point. So to gain that many subs, I know it's really slow in the beginning. That's what they always say. But we are a growing community of PC enthusiasts. So if you are new to the channel and you like things like topics, for example, overclocking, memory, CPUs, GPUs, just PC build advice in general, get subscribed to the channel. We have a Discord community that's growing in number, and there's a lot of helpful people in there. So if I'm not available to answer questions, somebody in there will definitely help you guys out. So get subscribed to the channel. At the very least, it does help me grow. My goal is to try to get enough of a viewership that I can start requesting review samples from these companies, because I don't get review samples. So anytime you guys see me reviewing hardware, it either means that I purchased it myself or I borrowed it from a viewer of the channel. I know RK has helped out with providing the 7800 XT in the past. So things like that, I'm very grateful for that because it does help me weigh in on the hardware side without having to basically buy everything from scratch, because obviously I can't do that. So if I was given a review sample, I would have put a review out for the RTX 4070 Super. The 4070 Super, I guess we'll just get right into it. Hey Matt, hey Marcelo, hey everybody. So the 4070 Super is out, and I think the TLDR of it is nvidia making corrections to a lot of the criticisms that they got from the first launch of the 4070 almost a year ago at this point. A year ago, the 4070 Ti launched. I think the original 4070 was in March or something last year, somewhere around there. Don't remember exactly when, but it was a while back. So here we are in 2024, and now the RTX 4070 Super has launched, and all the reviews are out as of Wednesday, I believe. The card was, actually, I think it might have been, when was this? The 16th, yeah. So basically, Tuesday was when the reviews went live, and Wednesday was when the card was available for purchase. So my thoughts on this card, I think it's a decent graphics card. At $600, 12 gigabytes of VRAM is going to be the Achilles heel, but at least it's $600 for 12 gigabytes and not $800 for 12 gigabytes, which is what the original 4070 Ti was offering. So I think for 1440p, this card is a decent choice. Long term, I think that it is going to be reliant on frame generation, if anything, because eventually games are going to crank up the amount of VRAM, especially if you want to run your games at Ultra, or especially if you want to use RT and higher graphics settings. If you are going to use RT and you are using this card, then that makes frame generation even more important. So just know that the Achilles heel is going to be that 12 gigabytes of VRAM. in terms of longevity. So, but it is better than what we got last year with the 4070 Ti. Now, this card is not as fast as the 4070 Ti, but it's pretty close because they're claiming RTX 3090 performance for $600. But keep in mind that this card has half the VRAM of a 3090. So if you want to do stuff like 4K video editing, or if you want to use applications that use a lot of VRAM, and I'm not talking about games. Games, we've kind of touched on that already. But I'm talking about if you're going to use this for things like Stable Diffusion, AI workloads, LLMs, that kind of thing, then I would not recommend this graphics card, because I don't think that this graphics card is going to be a good long-term investment for those sort of things, namely 4K video editing and AI-related applications. But it's an okay card for 1440p gaming. Definitely a better offering than the 4070 Ti, as far as I'm concerned. And it is a nice bump over the existing 4070. And it's also competitive with AMD 7800 XT. Although this card is priced higher, I think that this card priced at where it is makes a lot more sense when you look at the 7800 XT compared to where the original 4070 sat in terms of the pricing. Hey, Ray. Okay, so you got one. You got the Gaming X Slim. Is that the white one? I think MSI had like two different ones. There was like two different Slims. There was the white one, and there was like a different one or something like that. Oh wow, the review for the Live Gamer. I'm gonna do a video on this soon. Oh, actually, we'll open that up because I want to talk about that. Yeah, I don't see... TechPower didn't review that MSI one. But just to kind of go over the conclusion here, let's just go over the conclusion, skip to the end here. So, the good things about it is it launches at the same price as the 4070. Now, this is something that I already speculated, that it would cost $600 for $599 as the MSRP, and I was correct on that. Decent performance increase over the 4070, beats the 7800 XT conclusively, performance similar to RTX 3090. That is what they advertised. They did deliver on that. Fantastic energy efficiency, that is true. DLSS, I think this thing only uses like 220 watts or so. We can look at the power consumption numbers. There are a couple things that I don't like about it. We will talk about that. There's some stuff that's missing here. But I'll point out later. DLSS 3, yes, that's 40 series. So that's nothing new. Fantastic energy efficiency, good temperatures, ray tracing performance improved. Improved in regards to what, though? I guess they're talking about the 4070. Compact dual slot. I do like that this is a dual slot design. Now, whether or not the AIB partners kept to the dual slot, that remains to be seen, but I really think that there's no reason to build a card using this die, the 4070 Super die, at a larger size than two slots. I think it's energy efficient enough that a dual slot is fine, and the more I have dealt with multi-GPU recently, I definitely want the GPUs to become smaller because they're getting too big to the point where now you can't really use more than one of them, realistically. Yours is the dual slot? Oh, you got the black one? Okay. This GPU will say is perfect for a mini ITX PC with 16... Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. Like 220 watts. So, okay, I got the number right. Yeah, I figured it was like 220 watts. Backplate includes support for HDMI. Like, this sort of stuff, I don't know why they put stuff like this. Like, realistically, idle fan stop and backplate included are things that I don't think they need to be mentioned as pros. Like, you would think that it should have those things as kind of a standard equipment, so that's kind of weird. Support for HDMI 2.1, support for AV1, okay. 16-pin power cable. Now, this is the sort of thing that I don't know if this is a good or a bad thing. Like, I personally am kind of neutral on the whole 16-pin power cable. For the high wattage GPUs, it makes sense to have the 16-pin. I don't think that a 220 watt GPU should force the buyer to adopt the 16-pin. So I'm a little bit disappointed that they opted to go with the 16-pin cable. This controversial adapter is included. Why they needed that on this card, I really don't know. I wish they would have instead opted for a 8-pin and a 6-pin, personally. Because an 8-pin plus a 6-pin, or maybe just dual 8-pin, but even just an 8-pin and a 6-pin would have been enough for this card. They wouldn't need dual 8-pin. They wouldn't need 16-pin. 16-pin is more like, that's essentially triple 8 slot or quad 8 slot is what that is. So why they need that, I don't know. This is annoying because if you have to use this and you don't have a power supply that supports this natively, you have to use the annoying adapter that sticks way out off the side. If you guys have watched like the Gamers Nexus review, I don't like how Steve leaves the adapter in the card, but he's doing it on purpose to make it look like it's a nuisance to have to use that adapter. Like if you notice, every time Gamers Nexus holds or shows the Founders Edition 40 series cards, they always have the adapter dangling off the connector in every single video where they show the Founders Edition card. And it's kind of dumb to see it, but they're doing it on purpose because they're trying to basically like, hey, NVIDIA, you opted to use this stupid connector, so we're going to have to keep it attached to the graphics card. And one of the reasons why they do it is because there's that whole controversial thing where that adapter plug can only handle like 30, what was it, like 20 to 30 insertions and disconnects before the connector could fail. So that's probably one of the reasons why they keep it plugged into the GPU 24/7, even if they're not using the GPU. Also, so they don't lose it, because that's the other thing too. You don't want to lose that adapter if you're swapping GPUs, because that could be a really pain. It could be a real pain to have to find that thing if you misplace it. So, but yeah, I don't consider this a pro. This on a 220 gigabyte graphics card is actually a negative thing. This would be a thumbs down if I was reviewing this card. Forcing someone to use a 16-pin adapter for a supposedly energy-efficient 220 watt GPU is, in my opinion, a very stupid decision. Matt's saying you'd rather have a 2 8-pin. Yeah, but the thing is, every GPU that's like more than $400 has a backplate, so I don't really consider that worth mentioning. You'd rather have 2 8-pin? Yeah, I know, I would too. Is that 30 connectors thing true? Yes, it's true. It's true. Technically, the PCIe one is not that much more. Like the standard 8-pin one is not that much more. Because if you look at that adapter, the adapter is so small that the little clip that has to exert the bending pressure to get it to clip on, that clip could easily break over time. It's really small, and a lot of like bending to push it in and snap in, and then just get it off. You have to like push hard to pull it out. Like, yeah, that's not gonna last very long. So again, this, in my opinion, is a negative for the 4070. This is kind of a requirement for high wattage GPU, but this is not a high wattage GPU, so they could have easily fit an 8-pin plus a 6-pin on their Founders Edition card. I really hope that the other cards, so if we look at some of these other ones, I really hope that they're not using the exact same dumb connector on every... Oh, no. Asus went and put one on there. I don't know if Gigabyte put one on theirs. If Gigabyte... Did they do it? I can't see. Where's the... Oh, man. Gigabyte failed, too. They all put the stupid connector on there. That was totally unnecessary. I'm going to assume that they all did it. They all did it. So yeah, that's really dumb. That connector's dumb. It's stupid. Like I don't like that connector. I think a lot of people that have 4090s would agree that they don't like that connector. It's just something that you have to worry about, especially if you like change GPUs a lot. Okay, so what else did I want to call out here? Price of $600. Nvidia's new card sells at the same price as the original. Okay, the 4070 is getting a $50 price cut. Oh, that is already effective now, by the way. So I wanted to point out, if anybody wanted to get the original 4070, not the Super, you can already get the 4070 for $549. You can buy a 4070. Let me see. Where's the... See all buying options. Oh, it's already out of stock. Wow. Okay. Well, they sold... Wait a minute. Oh, no, that's a Super. Never mind. That's not what I was looking for. I was looking for the non-Super. Oh, because I sorted by that. That's why. Yeah, see? You can already buy the 4070 Founders Edition for the reduced price. So they're already $549. At least the Founders Edition is. And actually, look, the other AIB ones are as well. So that's good to see. So those are discounted now. I don't know. Like, I feel like the $50 difference is probably worth it. It depends on... Is this thing... Hold on. Where is the average FPS? Average FPS. So here is... Well, this is 1080p. I would grade this at 1440p. So 118, so we'll call this 119 frames per second. So that this rounds up to 119. The 3090 is 119.2. That rounds down to 119. So Nvidia's claims of matching the 3090 at $600 it's believable. They pulled it off. That is correct. And you can see the 6900 XT at 114. So I think, like Met was saying earlier, yeah, 6950 XT. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. So the 4070 Super is basically a 6950 XT. If you wanted to think, like, what is the closest AMD graphics card to this, it would be the 6950 XT. Because the 6950 XT, that's also kind of like the 3090. So 3090 for NVIDIA, 6950 XT for AMD. That both of those are basically the 4070 Super, except the 4070 Super has less VRAM than both of those cards. Where the 6950 XT has 16 gigabytes, the 3090 has 24 gigabytes. And that's the reason why, honestly, the 3090 still has some pretty good resale value because of that 24 gigabyte VRAM. Now, half of that RAM is probably going to fail in the next 3 years, depending on how hard someone pushes the card, because half of that RAM is on the back, and it gets cooked all the time. But anyway, the point is, it has a good amount of VRAM, so if you're going to use it for, like, AI stuff, the 3090, a used 3090 is probably the better way to go than, like, a 4070 Super. Specifically for AI stuff, I wanted to point that out. I'm not saying to get a 3090 for gaming versus this, because I think that in terms of, like, there's no reason to buy a 3090 used for gaming when you can just get a brand new 4070 Super for gaming. Like, yeah, it has half the VRAM, but it's gaming. It's not like you need 24 gigabytes of VRAM for the performance tier that this card is supposed to exist at, which is, per NVIDIA, this is a 1440p max graphics card. So that's how they're declaring it. So that's how I'm going to grade it. And actually, based off of where it sits in the stack, that's exactly how I would grade it. So I consider it a 1440p card. 3090 Ti doesn't have... Yeah, 3090 Ti does not have that problem. All the VRAM on the 3090 Ti is on the same side as the die. All 24 gigabytes. so it doesn't have the problem. But yeah, it's a nice improvement over the 4070. If you look at this, 103, so we'll call that 104 FPS on 4070 versus, and this is across an average range for 1440p, versus 119 for the Super, and then the AMD 7800 XT is 109. So the AMD card is kind of like sort of in between those two, although I think it's, yeah, it's kind of in between those two. Doesn't have what issue? Doesn't have the VRAM burning up issue. Okay, so let's see how it does at 4K. At 4K, here's where things... Okay, this is where the weak point of this card starts to become more visible. As you go up in resolution, this card starts to fall behind the 3090. So remember, NVIDIA claims this is a 3090 for $600 with half the VRAM. Now, look at this. At 4K, the 4070 Super is averaging 67.5 frames per second. Now, that is a respectable amount of average FPS at 4K resolution, but look at the 3090. The 3090 is now pulling ahead of the 4070 Super. It's now 72. It's now the 3090 is basically the same as the 4070 Ti at 4K resolution, or at 1440p resolution. The 3090 was basically the same as the 4070 Super, and the 4070 Ti was further ahead. So now, what is happening as you go up in resolution, the 4070 Super falls behind and the 4090 pulls ahead. Now, why is this happening? This is because the 4070 Super is a 4-cylinder engine. The 3090 is a V8. It's a 8-cylinder engine. This is the easiest way I can make it to understand for people who do not fully understand the technical differences. If you understand cars, we're talking about a Honda Civic, aka 4070 Super, versus a Dodge Challenger or a Ford Mustang, which is a 3090, in terms of how it uses a lot more power, but it has a lot more horsepower. It has a lot of brute force hardware, aka I refer to it as a V8. So it pulls ahead at 4K resolution because the bus width is wider. It is significantly wider in order to fit all that VRAM, or fill all that VRAM up. I'm not saying bus width and power draw matter more with higher shader count versus higher clock speed. Yeah, exactly the reason why I like to use the car analogy when referring to these, what I consider lightweight GPUs, because the 4070 Super, in my mind, is a lightweight 4-cylinder, like a Honda Civic, a Toyota Corolla. That's basically what the 4070 Super is, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of the size of the bus width and the VRAM amount. It has to match, right? The 3090 pulls ahead because it's got more horsepower. So, yeah, that's kind of where that's at. So this is the reason, and the reason why this is relevant, and this is the reason why, if you guys remember last year when the 4070 came out, a lot of people like to compare that graphics card to the 3080, and in some cases the 3080 Ti. Now, why they compare it to 3080 Ti, I don't know, but people were comparing the 4070 to a 3080 Ti. But look at this. The original 4070 is averaging below 60 frames per second at 4K. It's 58.6, so we can call that 59. So almost 60. Just underneath 60 for the original 4070 at 4K. Versus the 3080, which is able to hold its own at 63.6 or 64 frames per second. That's because the 3080 has a wider bus width. It's basically a 6-cylinder engine, and the 4070 is a 4-cylinder engine. No, I'm sorry, it's a 4-cylinder, dude. It's not an Accord. I mean, unless it's a 4-cylinder Accord, and those did exist. I think they still exist. No, it's a 4-cylinder. If it's a 4-cylinder, if it's an Accord, it's like the cheapest Accord. It's like the Accord that lacks like all the. It's like an Accord that has the like crank for the windows. It doesn't even have the one-touch up-down windows. if we're saying a 4070 Super is a Honda Accord, it's the really ghetto Accord. It's the one that doesn't have. You have to like crank the window with the handles on the Accord if you're buying a 4070 Super Accord. That's basically what it is. All right, 325 watt versus 2. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right, what are we talking about? Honda Civic is 4060. No, 4060 is Honda Fit. 4060 is Honda Fit. or Honda Jazz. For those of you that are like not in North America, the Honda Jazz is basic. In North America, it's called the Honda Fit. Assuming that's still around. In like places like Australia, that car is called the Honda Jazz. All right, it was. Assuming they still sell the Honda Fit. I don't even know if they still make those. But yeah, that's the 4060. 4060 is Honda Fit. 4070 is Honda Civic. The 4070 Super is like the premium Honda Civic. The 4070 regular is like the lower trim. You know what I mean? Like the 4070 Super is, what do they call it? Like the EX or the LX or something. And the 4070 Ti is like a Type R. It's like a Type R. No, it's not Type R. That's like a Corolla thing. It's a Honda Civic Si. The 4070 Super, no, the 4070 Ti and soon the 4070 Ti Super, those are basically Honda Civic Si. That's what those are, for those that are wondering. So yeah. Okay, so anyway, I hope that kind of makes it easier to understand why the 3090 is still better than the 4070 Super as you go up in resolution. I mean, just the fact that it has 24 gigabytes of VRAM. Oh, there is a Type R? Oh, okay, I thought there was a Type R. I'm getting confused, because I know there's like a Corolla, some kind of like sport trim Corolla. I thought it was Type R or Type S or something. I forget. Anyway. We're getting way off track talking about cars. So anyway, yeah, that's basically it. I mean, it's definitely a decent choice, I would say. Although, in my opinion, this should have been what the 4070 was originally. I feel like this is just kind of, this to me is like I don't know. This is either going to be like nvidia trying to double dip and get somebody to like side grade to one of these if they bought the 4070 and they were kind of like disappointed in it or underwhelmed. They're probably thinking that they can like trade up to this or something. But see, at the end of the day, that ends up resulting in more sales for nvidia. So they win no matter what. Type R is their high performance 3090. 3090 isn't a Civic. 3090 would be like a what I guess, what is 30, I guess the what do they call it? The Honda NSX or something? Like it's one of the like gas guzzler cars, or the 3090 is like a Honda Ridgeline. It's like a pickup truck or something. I don't know. Like basically, the 3090 uses a lot of electricity, so it's not energy efficient. So it's a gas guzzler, if we're talking in terms of cars, and it has a lot of cylinders because it uses a lot of gas. No. Well, don't say the 3090 is a Civic, because it's not. A Civic is the 3090 is at least a 6-cylinder, if not 8-cylinder engine, because it uses so much electricity by comparison to the 4070. Kia Stinger? I mean, I guess. I don't know how many cylinders that has, but it has to have at least 6, if not more. So, bus width is synonymous with cylinder numbers. Let's see, so if we go here, this is the problem. This is the problem with the 4070 Super. 192-bit bus. Now, this is not as big as a problem as it was previously, because if we go to this card, oh, never mind. It's the same problem. Never mind. Never mind. For some reason, I thought the 4070 was like 198 or 128, but it's 192. Oh, okay, so it's all 8104. So yeah, it's still 8104. So my understanding is the 4070 Ti the fully unlocked? Okay. So the 4070 Ti is the fully unlocked 8104? So all three of these are the same thing. They're all the same die. The 4070, the 4070 Super, and the 4070 Ti are all AD104. They are all the same 192-bit bus GPU. This one is 80. That is, wait, that's 80. Wait, they're all, oh no, that, oh, okay, wait a minute. So hold on a second. Yeah, so the 4070 Ti is the fully unlocked version of the 8104. Is that correct? Because I think I think it is. I think that's correct. So, okay, I see what's going on here. I understand now. I see NVIDIA's game. Okay, so the 4070 Ti is the true AD104. However, NVIDIA tried to charge a ridiculous $800 asking price for a 192-bit bus. You know, that's like asking you to pay in car money. That's like trying to charge $50,000 for a Honda Civic. That's essentially why the 4070 Ti was very bad value, because it's an 8104. That's the small die. That means, I mean, this is a 294 millimeter square die. This, at $800, is this is blatant robbery. This is thievery on NVIDIA's part to charge $800 for 12 gigabytes in a 192-bit bus. Which is unfortunate, because this is the true. This terrible graphics card is the true 8104. Now we're stuck with a lesser version of that, because the 4070 Super is a cut down variant. The true version has 7,680 cores, whereas now the 4070 Super has only 7,168. Now, if you look at this, that's not a whole, that's not a lot less. So the fact that it's now $200 cheaper for what is almost the same graphics card, that is an acceptable compromise, I think, for the average person looking to purchase a 4070 class card at $600. So that is the reason why this is still, even though it's inferior to the 4070 Ti, the price corrects that. It basically overcomes that inferiority that the Super has over the 4070 Ti. So it would be nice if they sold the 4070 Ti at $600 originally, but they never did that. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at. So if you look at the 4070, the 4070 is way cut down. Way cut down. At least the Super has over 7,000 cores, just like the 4070 Ti. Whereas the original 4070 has less than 6,000 cores. That is a massive cut down. They just cut that thing with the scissors. They just cut it up. RTX 4070 Ti is like In-N-Out Burger, awesome burger with crappy. What? Oh, the Discord thing's still not working? Man, okay, hold on. Yeah, I thought I fixed it. Oh, you know what? I think I know what happens. I think I put it up for like 2 weeks or 3 weeks or something, and then it expires or something. Here, I'll fix it here. I'm gonna update the link, guys. Hold on. Well, the thing is, I set it to not expire. So why is it expiring? All right, well, I'm making a new link. Max number, no limit. Expire never. I thought that's what I did last time. Okay. Copy that. Let me go put that in here. I'm going to fix the Discord link now. Sorry about that. I thought that was fixed already. Okay. So I just saved it. So you are going to have to refresh the stream or refresh the browser page to get the updated link. Okay. Well, I updated it. So it should be different from the one that was there. And hopefully that fixes it. Because I thought I fixed that last time. Because someone brought that to my attention before, and I thought I fixed it. I guess for whatever reason it didn't save it, or you know what? I think I know what happened. It was, so I updated the link in the old live stream, but I did not update my template. My template still has the old link, so I'm gonna go fix that like after the stream. Okay. All right, cool. Okay, so even though it's inferior to the Ti, because it is significantly less in terms of cost, it is acceptable. So, although it still feels kind of weird spending $600 for a 192-bit card, that, to me, that's a little bit annoying. But the thing is, they do deliver on the performance numbers, even with the 192-bit bus. So it's a decent card for 1440p. Just know the limitations of this card, that as you go up in resolution, that whole advantage it shares, or the ability for it to be matching a 3090, kind of falls apart as you go up in resolution. And people might not think about that. People might say, oh, well, that's okay because I'm never going to go to 4K in the next couple of years. Well, the thing that I would mention here to those that are thinking that is, just remember that newer games will be more demanding. So a game that runs at 118 frames today at 1440p, 2-3 years from now, newer games could be running at what you see as 4K FPS numbers at 1440p. So just compare the games that came out in 2023 to the games that came out 4 or 5 years ago. And then you'll see what I mean. Like, look at The Last of Us Part 1, Jedi Survivor, Hogwarts Legacy, Forspoken, Ratchet and Clank, Rift Apart, Starfield, etc. Just look at the games that came out last year, how they run, and then look at like the previous games released by those companies. So compare that to like Fallout, Metro, The Last of Us. Speaking of not The Last of Us, Horizon Zero Dawn is an older game. This year we're going to be getting Horizon Forbidden West. So it'll be interesting to see how much harder Horizon Forbidden West will be to run versus the older Horizon Zero Dawn. Because Horizon Zero Dawn is a game from 2017. And Horizon Forbidden West is a game that's coming out this year on PC. So that will be kind of a thing to look at to see, okay, well, how does that do? How much harder is it to run Forbidden West versus Zero Dawn? And that kind of will prove my point in that as newer games come out, they're going to be more demanding. So you're going to, even if you don't consider 4K, you would look at 4K results as a projection for the future performance of this GPU at a lower resolution like 1440p. So that's where I would just caution people who think that, you know, they'll never need to, they're never going to upgrade to 4K. Well, you know, never say never, and this is representative of 2K performance in, or even 3K performance in the next like two to 3 years. Basically the next hardware refresh cycle. So this is still relevant. Even if someone's not giving it 4K, you still want to look at how the GPU does at 4K, just to kind of give you an idea at how that GPU will age. Okay, so that's the 4070 Super. Overall, I would say it's a decent card. Like, I don't think it's an amazing card, because I don't like the idea of paying $600 for 192-bit bus and only 12 gigabytes of VRAM, but it's definitely a better option than what we had last year from the 40 series. So in that regard, it's decent. It's a decent upgrade, because the original 40 series was just kind of underwhelming. If you want to future-proof 1440, you either go 49. Well, yeah, but, you know, like, not a lot of people can do that. That's the thing, because those are expensive. Although the 7900 XTX is really not crazy expensive, considering what you're getting. The 4090 is still kind of way up there. I don't know. I feel like if someone's considering the 4090, in order for me to recommend the 4090 for 1440p, they'd have to tell me what they're running right now, because we already know the 5090 is coming out later this year. Like, that's 100% guaranteed. Now, what it'll cost, I don't know. I would assume it's going to cost, you know, anywhere from $1,600 to $2,000, if I had to guess. That's the 5090 is what I'm referring to. Now, the 4090 is still hard to get, so if you really want a 4090, supposedly the supply is going to get better, but that whole thing about China ban and the AI stuff, and that's still kind of happening. So, but I don't know how much longer that's going to be a problem. We know crypto's coming back this year, but you don't have to worry about 4090. 4090s are not going to be affected by crypto. The cards that will be affected by crypto are 4070 Super and 7800 XT and 7700 XT and 4060 Ti and the original 4070. Those are the cards that are at risk of disappearing and going extinct in a flash if crypto comes back and mining becomes profitable again. So just keep that in mind. So if you're somebody who typically budgets for the anywhere from like $300 to $700 in that spending range for a GPU, just know that there is a chance that later this year, that market of GPUs, that whole segment from like $300 to $700, I don't know about $700. That's kind of expensive for a crypto miner. So I would say from like $300 to $600, that is the range where the people who do crypto mining using GPUs, they'll spend en masse to build like a 6 node or 6 GPU node, mining node, or an 8 GPU mining node, depending on what they're using. So just keep that in mind. I just want to throw that warning out there, because if you're someone who doesn't care about flagship GPUs like 4090 because they're stupid expensive, or the 7900 XTX because it's $1,000 and that's still too expensive. Same thing with the 4080 Super, which we are going to talk about later. Those GPUs are always going to be around. The only challenge for those GPUs is going to be AI, because people want those GPUs for AI. I do feel like the 4080 Super it's going to be easier to come by because it only has 16. Now 16 is still a good amount for AI, So it could vanish because of AI if the 4090 is too hard to get. But I think that the AMD XTX, the NVIDIA 4090, and to a lesser extent the AMD 7900 XT, which people often forget about. The 7900 XT has 20 gigabytes of VRAM. That is very good value at like $750 for like an AI on the cheap. The 7900 XT is actually really good value for AI, for like artificial song generation, stable diffusion, artwork, that kind of stuff. The 700 XT is very, very good at those applications. And it's relatively cheap compared to what you have to spend for like an NVIDIA GPU with similar VRAM. If you want to future-proof, yeah. So, but, I mean, yeah. The thing with those GPUs, though, is we are looking at a new generation inbound, although we are several months out from that. That will take place at the tail end of this year, and we're only at the beginning of this year. So we don't know like what other refreshes will come out between now and the end of the year. So it could be that AMD does like a refresh, kind of like the Super stuff. Because remember, AMD did that with the 6000 series. They did, just like how NVIDIA's launching 3 Supers, back in like 2 years ago, AMD launched 3 refresh cards, which are kind of like the Super cards. They did the 6650, the 6750, and the 6950 XT. So they did 3 refresh cards, which are kind of like the Super cards. So, you know, they're kind of in that like anywhere from like 5 to 10% uplift, depending on the game, depending on the AIB. So AMD could do something like that. I don't really know if they're going to do that, or if they even really need to do that. Although I feel like if AMD wanted to keep prices where they are and keep momentum, they probably would be considering some kind of mid-cycle refresh, like 7750 XT, 7850 XT, etc. Those type of cards. Although I'm not really sure what they would do besides give them faster VRAM. Because unlike NVIDIA, AMD, well, actually that's not true. AMD does have dies that they're not selling in the consumer market. We talked about this last year. Because if you guys remember, do you guys remember when I kept saying that the 7800 XT was going to be this GPU? I kept hypothesizing that the 7800 XT would be the consumer variant of the Radeon Pro W7800. This is a 256-bit, 16 gigabyte if it was consumer, and it has 4,480 cores, and it has, 70 CU? Yeah, 70 compute unit. I thought that the 7800 XT would literally just be this same GPU, just for the consumer market, so it'd be much cheaper. Because I think this thing is like $2,500 or something. So AMD could do that. Think about it. AMD could potentially do their own super refresh, just like NVIDIA. If they wanted to, they could convert this Navi 31 into a 7850 XT and sell that. It would be a 70 compute unit 7850 XT versus the 60 compute unit, which is what we currently have as a 7800 XT. So if they wanted to do a super, they have actual dies available. I just don't know if it's worth even bothering. Yeah, I feel like this. So the 7800 XT, when it launched, it was faster. It was decisively faster than the 4070. In fact, I remember when the 4070 came out, the 6800 XT and the 3080 were both faster than the 4070 most of the time in rasterization. So that's the reason why. And then 7800 XT came out. It was a little bit faster than those cards. So, yeah. But now NVIDIA has basically leapfrogged again in front of the 7800 XT with the 4070 Super. So it'll be interesting to see how AMD responds, because they could pull out this card and sell it in the consumer market, because I don't think it would be that crazy to turn one of these into a consumer card. Basically sell it at half VRAM. So it'd be like a 16 gigabyte card, and it would be the 70 compute units. So it'd be Navi 31. I think that would be viable as a competitor to the 4070 Super. So something like this. Although this die is more expensive to produce than Navi 32, so they may not even bother doing it. Just something to think about for like a mid-cycle refresh. So that kind of rounds out the coverage on 4070 Super. I think it's good for people who have like a... if you're on like a 2070, this would be a very good upgrade. Or if you're on like a 2070 Super, this would still be a very good upgrade. Even if you're on like a 2080, this would be a good upgrade. And this is similar amounts of money as what somebody paid for when they bought the 2080. Or I guess, well, the 2080 was more than this. But like the people who bought like a 2070 Super, I think those were like $500-ish, $550, $600. So you're paying similar money years later for a much faster card. So yeah, I feel like if you're on like Turing, or if you're on an ancient 1080 Ti, this would be a really good upgrade. Although people who buy 80 Ti cards don't like the idea of buying a lesser tier product. So they're less likely to buy this, but it is a very good upgrade nonetheless. Okay, so that's going to be that one. Let's talk about Intel's GPUs now. So Intel Battlemage is on track. If we look at this little slide here that Intel had at their investor meeting. Now this was actually something from 2022. So this is kind of an old slide deck. So it's a little bit outdated because they're still declaring like Battlemage 2023/2024. Well, we know that we're in 2024 now. So Battlemage is definitely 2024. And then Celestial is definitely something beyond 2024. So this is definitely an outdated slide. But you can see Battlemage is on its way. A lot of people think, from what I have gathered online, a lot of people are thinking, or they're assuming, and I think they're incorrectly assuming, that this card is going to be as fast as a 4080 Super and a 7900 XTX. If you're somebody who thinks that Intel's Battlemage is going to be rivaling an nvidia 4080 Super or an AMD 7900 XTX, I'm just going to tell you straight up, you have the wrong expectations, and if those are your expectations, you are going to be terribly disappointed when Battlemage launches later this year. So I'm just doing a level set for those that are really wanting Battlemage to be great, and it is going to be great overall, at least I think so, but not that kind of great. Like, people who think that Battlemage is going to rival a 7900 XTX or an nvidia 4080 or 4080 Super, they do not have the correct expectations going into this launch. And they're going to be very disappointed, and they're going to like hate on Intel and say Intel's trash. But that's not Intel's fault. That's their own fault for having the wrong expectations for this product. So I kind of already gave you guys my estimate for how much faster or where I think this will be. And where I think it will be is what I said last time. I said in a previous live stream that Battlemage, the fastest Intel Battlemage flagship GPU, will be on par with an NVIDIA RTX 4070. I'll repeat that. The Battlemage flagship is expected to be, from my predictions, not whatever Reddit or whoever you guys have been reading or listening to, the Battlemage flagship will be similar to the RTX 4070, non-super. So if you're somebody who is thinking about getting a 4070 Super, but you're holding out to see how well Battlemage does, I've got news for you. Most likely, Battlemage will definitely be slower than the 4070 Super. Now, how much slower? I don't know. How much closer it will be to the 4070 Super, that remains to be seen. But in general, I expect best case scenario, Battlemage should be around RTX 4070 or AMD 6800 XT in terms of the performance. So basically, NVIDIA RTX 3080, 6800 XT, or the 4070. All three of those cards are very similar in performance. Met says, you think it could match the performance of the 7800 XT? Yeah, and remember, the 6800 XT, the 4070, the 3080, all three of those are kind of similar to the 7800 XT. Now, they're not quite as fast. In some weird scenarios, the 6800 XT punches way above its weight and like is equal to the 7800 XT in some scenarios. And Intel does have that degree of variability. That's the nice thing about Intel. Intel is unpredictable in the sense that in some games, they can be a lot better than expected, and in other games, they can be a lot worse than expected. Case in point, look at how well Intel does in The Last of Us. They do atrocious in The Last of Us, but they do pretty good. Oh, they're also god-awful in Starfield. Like there's even a point in this video where I think Brad Chacos or one of those two guys asked Tom Peterson, like, well, how does it do in Starfield? And his response to them, as soon as they said Starfield, he was like, oh man, you really had to go there. You really had to go there at the very beginning, because he knows that Intel is very underperforming in games like Starfield. So I don't know if Battlemage will be able to like improve that much, but it does well in some games. So I kind of think that it does well. It does well in Hogwarts Legacy so much that it gets close to the 3080. Wait, really? Are you talking about? Wait, at 1440p? Well, but that's what I'm saying. There's a degree of variability, but I think on average, we can declare, without even having any results, we can already declare the projected performance tier by adding 60%. Bam, right there. This is the A770. What is 65% faster? 65% faster than the A770? RTX 4070. That shows you how far behind the Intel GPU is compared to kind of like where its 256-bit bus is supposed to line up. So that is around, like worst case scenario, it is as fast as a 3070 Ti or a Radeon 7700 XT. And I'm talking about Battlemage, guys. I'm not talking about Arc. I'm talking about Battlemage. Worst case scenario, you can expect 3070 Ti and 7700 XT performance. Best case scenario, we're talking like 4070 and maybe 6800 XT and 3080. But, I mean, these are where it's starting to really, really stretch the limits of what this card can do, because the 6800 XT is like 70% faster than Intel's current GPU. So think about that. Like, they've got a metric range. Typically, you want to do at least 40% better than your previous generation. Otherwise, you basically failed in terms of your engineering accomplishment. So you want to do like 40 to 60%. 40 to 60% is a good, decent improvement over the previous generation. And that is the reason why I can predict, best case scenario, the new Battlemage is going to be like a 4070. Not a super, just a regular 4070. Because that's 65%. That's already kind of like the upper end of what you can expect it to be. Unless they somehow like do like a Ryzen moment, like what AMD did from Bulldozer to Ryzen, and they go like they exceed their goal by so much, and they get like 80% gain, that would put them at a 7800 XT in terms of the performance uplift. Oh, well, that's with ray tracing. Well, I'm talking about rasterization, because Where they really need to improve is the overall average performance, which does not include RT. RT will naturally improve as well, but where they fall short is definitely rasterization. They haven't even gotten past that, as far as I'm concerned, to worry too much about ray tracing performance. Battlemage is probably going to eat 300 watts, though. I don't know about that, because it's supposed to be on... The rumor is that Battlemage will be on TSMC 4 nanometer, which is a relatively modern node. So I don't know if it'll be 300 watts. I mean, it could be. It could be. I wouldn't be surprised if it's 300 watts. They're going to have to push more power if they're going to try to get like 70% gain. So they're just going to have to. It has to be a larger die. It just has to have way more. Like, this has got to be way more than what it is. Like, this thing is a 400... Well, this is already a pretty large die. 460 millimeter. I could see them going to, like, 500 millimeters, but I don't really see them going that much more. I think it would be anywhere from, like, 250 to 300 watts. I don't think Intel will go to, like, 350 watts. I could be wrong. Who knows? I think it will be somewhere between 250 and 300 watts for the Battlemage flagship, which wouldn't be that bad. If you think about it, let's say like a 275 watt that performs like a 4070. 4070 is... What's the wattage on this? This is like a 200. This is a 200 watt. So if Intel has to do like 275 to 300 watts to match the 4070... A lot of people will say that's a failure. I consider that a success, considering how far behind they are. So if it takes them 100 watts more to match an NVIDIA 4070, I call that a win. I call that a win. I mean, I guess that means people might think, oh, you have really low expectations. No, I have realistic expectations. Because what people asking them to make something that rivals an XTX and a 4080... I don't think they have any idea how hard it is to make a GPU. They just don't know what they're talking about. So it's just a bunch of noise. So, yeah, I would say like 275 watts, 300 watts, somewhere in there. And 4070 performance in terms of rasterization. I don't know what it will be. Like if it's a 384-bit bus. I mean, if it's 384-bit bus, it's definitely going to be like a 300-watt GPU. Kind of like a 6900 XT. Well, no, actually, no. That was a 256. So, yeah, something like a... What is this? It's 320. Maybe, something like that. But it won't be as fast as this. So, something like this. I think they'll still do... I think Intel's still going to do 16 gigs of VRAM, though. I don't think they're going to go more than 16. I think what they're going to do is they're going to price it around 40, like, they're probably going to price it around $500, like AMD's 7800 XT. And it's going to have 16 gigs of VRAM, just like AMD's card. And if it's going to be slower than AMD's card in rasterization, but it might be faster. It could very well be a lot better in ray tracing than AMD's card, but it won't be as fast as NVIDIA in ray tracing. Although we don't know, might be equal to NVIDIA in ray tracing. So there's a lot of, like I said earlier, there's a lot of variability in terms of what Intel's Battlemage could actually bring to the table. It could be really good at ray tracing and underperforming in rasterization, so that it ends up being stuck at like a $500 price point. Or maybe even like I think it's going to be like $500. So here's the thing. Like, I think Intel could price it at $499 or maybe $449 if they want to be really aggressive. But I think they would do $499 for the flagship, 16 gigs of VRAM, and it would be like a 256 to 320-bit bus. And it would have better ray tracing than AMD, maybe even similar to NVIDIA or a little bit worse than NVIDIA. I don't think it would be better than NVIDIA at ray tracing, although they could surprise us. $499 with GTA 6 code. Well, if that happens, it'll be coming out like at the very, very end of the year. if it's gonna include a GTA 6 code, man, if it includes a GTA 6 code, I think like it will sell a lot. That's actually the way to move GPUs. Actually, bundling a game like GTA 6. Can you imagine it? Can you imagine if that was like an AMD bundle or something? Because AMD usually bundles like a lot throughout the year. Man, yeah, that type of game is like the sort of game that can actually make people buy the GPU. If they do that, but I think if they do GTA 6, GTA 6 is coming out like next year, so it will be one of those things where it's like, oh, you're promised the code when the game comes out, but it's not coming out for like another 3 months or something. So, but yeah, actually, it's not. We're joking aside, it's not going to have the GTA 6 code because GTA 6 is coming out on the consoles in 2025. That means that it won't come out to the PC until like 2026. So we're talking like 2 years from now at least if you want to play GTA 6 on PC. So by that time, well, maybe they'll do like a Celestial bundle. Maybe they'll bundle the Intel Celestial GPU with that. So actually, hold on a second. We can actually predict Celestial. We can already predict how fast Intel's 3rd generation GPU is. So if we go to 4070, if I go back here, if we're just going to assume that this is Battlemage, so now all we do is we just go up the stack another 60%. Celestial will be as fast as an XTX. Oh man, that's funny. That is too funny. So if you want an Intel GPU that's going to rival AMD's current flagship or an RTX 4080 Super, you're going to be waiting until Celestial. That shows you how far behind they are. Wow, who would have thought? I actually have a GPU that's as fast as Intel's Celestial. Like two to 3 years before Celestial even shows up. Yeah, well, that means that they're going to have to make some significant changes because if they're that far behind, they're going to be stuck like selling what was a $1,000 GPU at like 50% off. Like when it comes out. It's like a discounted XTX at like you can get like XTX rasterization with way better ray tracing performance than the XTX. Only you got to wait like 4 years or 3 to 4 years, and it'll be like $500. It's like you gotta wait another like 3 to 4 years to get this type of GPU at 50% off from another vendor like Intel. So yeah, I don't know. That to me, they're gonna have to change something. Like they're gonna have to go really, really big or put a bunch of 3D V-cache. Maybe Intel should put 3D V-cache on their GPUs or something and see what happens. At least you'll have yeah, that's true. At least you'll get the GTA 6 code. And the thing is, I would assume that the ray tracing performance, the RT on the new Celestial, it's like it'll have this GPU's rasterization, but it will have like way better ray tracing than what this GPU actually offers today. So that would be good. At $500, that would actually be pretty decent, I would say. But we don't know. Things could change. Well, what that means, though, put that into perspective, to realize how far behind Intel is compared to NVIDIA. So that means that Intel's like 2 generations behind AMD. Because if it takes them 2 generations to get to what AMD already has for over a year, that means they're like 2 generations, about 2 to 2.5 generations behind AMD in GPU performance. Now, look at NVIDIA. NVIDIA has the 4090. That means that if you have to wait 4 years for Celestial from Intel, after 4 years of waiting, your new Intel flagship will still be slower than a 4090. It'll still be like 20 to 30% slower than a 3 generation old at that point RTX 4090. Now, maybe Celestial will have better ray tracing performance than a 4090, but it's still way slower. It's like 20 to 30%, depending on resolution. It's going to be 20 to 30% slower. We'll call it 25% slower, because if I look at this, what's the difference? 23%, right? So 23% slower than a 4090 in rasterization, which means on average it's slower. Celestial is slower than a 4090. So yeah, Intel's going to have to do something magical if they ever want to close the gap. Otherwise, they're going to be stuck living in the shadow of AMD by like 2 generations and 3 generations behind NVIDIA, if they ever want to be able to catch up. I mean, that shows you guys like how far behind even AMD was, like a whole generation. And even some people might say they're a whole generation. I don't think they're a whole generation behind NVIDIA. I think AMD is kind of like a half generation behind NVIDIA, because if you look at this, AMD's fastest GPU is, okay, the 4090 is what? According to TechPowerUp, 23% faster. 23% faster is not an entire generation ahead. Because remember what I said? 40 to 60% is your generational uplift. So if NVIDIA, if the 4090 was 40 to 60% faster than the 7900 XTX, then I would say AMD is a full generation behind NVIDIA. But because it's only like 23% faster than AMD's fastest card, that's kind of like a half generation ahead. So that's the reason why AMD is still kind of like in the race, in the direct comparison with NVIDIA. They're still going to sell the Alchemist cards all the way to Celestial, or are they going? I don't think they're going to. Why would they? That's an interesting idea, though, Marcelo. Like, what they could do is they could just keep selling Alchemists, but they would just rebrand them as lower end products. That is a strategy that both AMD and NVIDIA do from time to time, especially AMD in the past. When AMD didn't have a lot of money, they would rebadge their previous generation cards over and over again. They did it like twice, right? Like, you guys remember the, well, do we have to bust out paint? I have recently upgraded all of my PCs to Windows 11. So I'm actually on Windows 11 now for like all of my machines. So let's see, is this going to come up? No, it didn't come up. What happened? Capture method, Windows 10 and up. Okay, there we go. Okay. So I'm on Windows 11 Paint now instead of Windows 10. So it's going to take a little bit of getting used to. But if you guys remember the the Radeon HD 7970. This launched in November 2011 was when this thing launched. Then I want to say it was like, I don't remember the exact time. I think it was like September 2013. It got rebadged as an R9 280X. So this was a rebrand of the 7970. Then I'm trying to remember, did it get rebranded? Okay, then it didn't get rebranded. It got replaced by Tonga. So basically it got rebranded. And it was like the third fastest GPU in AMD's lineup, because there was the 290X and the 290. But remember, when AMD introduced R9 290X, then they rebranded it in, I think it was June 2015. They rebranded the R9 290X to the R9 390X. So they did the rebrand thing a couple of times. So this was a flagship. Then it became like the third fastest GPU. This was the new flagship in 2013. Then it became the third fastest GPU in 2015. So Intel could very well do that, meaning Intel could do like A770, which launched in October of 2022, and they could rebrand it as, although I don't know what they would call it because they're sticking with their naming convention. So it would be very almost like false advertising if they do like a August 2024 and they rebadge it as like a B Battlemage 860. I don't know what they would call it. Like just rebadge it as this. Like what would happen? What do you guys think that would be like a relevant thing for them to do? We need that FSR versus DLSS follow-up video. Oh, we gave the answers in a previous live stream. Yeah, I guess I'll have to make a follow-up video. What I'll do is I'll probably create a clip of the live stream where we analyze them in real time. Because we had like it was like a quiz. People were voting in the chat. I did polls and people would vote in real time which one they thought was FSR, which one they thought was DLSS. So I might actually turn that into a clip. Yeah. We've already given the answers, Roller, if you were wondering. They were done like it was like after New Year's. It was like the first week of January. The answers were already revealed. I have to go back and look which live stream. But yeah, what I'll do is I'll find that section of the live stream and then I'll post that as a video. Because I don't see the point of just making a video of just like, here are the answers. Like that's not really good as a video itself. But we'll make it its own section. So Intel could do a rebranding of Alchemist as like a lower tier GPU. They could do that as an alternative to having to like manufacture and sell a whole bunch of new Battlemage chips. So maybe they could do that as like a cost savings thing. I don't think they'll do that though. I'm more inclined to believe that Intel will refresh the entire stack with a new generation, because Alchemist had supposedly Alchemist has so many hardware related limitations that I don't think they want to have to support that long term. So they're probably gonna want to like EOL end of life Alchemist as fast as possible once they get Battlemage out. Now, they're not going to do it like overnight. Obviously, you have to support your product for at least like 5 years or so in terms of driver support. So I would say 2027. Like by the time GTA 6. So let's look at it this way. We may very well never get an official driver on the A770 for GTA 6. Like GTA 6 could launch in 2027 on PC, and Intel could be like right as soon as, or like a week before, or like the day before GTA 6 launches, Intel announces end of life, end of support for Alchemist GPUs. And then they just like, sorry, there's no more drivers for Alchemist. So that's it. It's over. Their legacy, it's like a GTX 480. You can't get new drivers for that GPU anymore. Sorry. That's what they'll do. So we could possibly get in a scenario where we'll never be able to play GTA 6 on an Alchemist with official driver support. So if it's buggy and artifacting all over the place, and it's not a hardware problem because you can play other games just fine, well, that's it. Because I don't think they're going to want to they're not going to want to support Alchemist because it has so many limitations compared to their newer stuff. So, kind of like how AMD wanted to get off of GCN and move everything over to RDNA as soon as possible, but they were kind of stuck for a few years. All the 28 Alchemist users would be sad. Yeah, I know. Met would be sad. I would kind of be sad. I mean, I have Alchemist, but it's like if they have a much better card, if Celestial's out and if Celestial's like an XTX, but it's way better in ray tracing, I'll probably have upgraded that by then. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't really know what they're going to do, to be honest, in terms of rebadging. I don't think they're going to do a rebadge. I think what they're just going to do is introduce Battlemage, and they'll probably have like 3 or 4 GPUs. They'll slowly phase out A770, A750, probably at the end of this year or early next year. And then the A380 might remain as kind of the budget entry-level GPU, kind of like how the 3050 is still around. And the RX 6400. You know, like those type of GPUs will stick around. So, okay, so let's talk about... Let's go over this story briefly. So speaking of Intel, we're still talking about Intel. Intel to hold the IFS Direct Connect on February 21st. The CEO talks next-gen semiconductor fabs and China. So there is a slide here. So for those that can't read Japanese, this basically says... It basically says 4 years. So over 4 years, they did 5 nodes, 5 process nodes, and then more to come. And that's what this Intel Next Plus is and all that stuff. So basically, Intel claims they did 5 nodes in 4 years. And that's going to be 18 angstrom, Intel Next Plus, Intel Next Plus Plus. So they're pretty confident. But the thing is, the reality is they don't really show... They're not really... To me, they're not projecting the right message with their process technology. Like, Intel is hoping that they can get customers... Like, they can get NVIDIA or AMD, so they can manufacture their GPUs, or in the case of AMD, their CPUs, on Intel's fabs, and they can make money off of their competitors that way. They would very much like to do that. But when we look at what Intel is doing, Intel is saying, 5 nodes in 4 years, so meaning they're projecting like, oh, we've got so much progress. We're doing good. We're awesome. But then when you look at what they're actually doing, when it comes to their chiplet-based CPUs, like Meteor Lake and Arrow Lake and all the ones that are going to come after those, they're actually going to TSMC for the tile parts, for the important parts of these new CPUs. They're making TSMC, or they're relying on TSMC to do the work or do the manufacturing. So it's like, well, what about your own nodes? Why do you have to use TSMC when everyone else is already using TSMC? Like, why add to the long line of manufacturing woes that everyone's running into? Like, you're just contributing to the problem. They're just making TSMC justify raising prices and making everything more expensive. Because what that translates into is if the wafers are more expensive, well, then what NVIDIA is going to do. They're just going to, increase the price of their GeForce cards even more. So it's like, because they want to sell you a 5090 for $2,500. That's their ideal price target. And they're slowly getting there. But this sort of thing, it's like, okay, look, guys, we got all these cool nodes. We're awesome, but when we're actually building our products, we're actually using TSMC on the side. And then the thing with Battlemage and Celestial, assuming Celestial is the same, Battlemage is TSMC based. So Intel's GPUs aren't using any of these nodes, at least not the one that's coming out this year. So that to me is bizarre. That to me is sending the message that something is clearly wrong with their manufacturing division. They've got a lot of issues that they still haven't been able to work through. So talking about China, Pat states that the gap between China's semiconductor adventures, I like how they say China's semiconductor adventures, like they're all playing Genshin Impact, like just discovering the world, and that of the top fabs in the world is around 10 years. So basically, according to Intel's CEO, China is a decade behind the top fabs. So I guess that implies Intel and TSMC. Or maybe TSMC, I don't know. The export policies that have been put in place, these are the words of Pat Gelsinger. The export policies that have been put in place, recently we've seen the Dutch in particular in place, the US policies, the Japanese policies, etc. It sort of puts a floor in the 10 to 7 nanometer range right now, for it. And, we're racing to go below 2 nanometers and then 1.5. And, we see no end to that in sight. He goes on to say, I see the policies in place, and it's not like China's not going to keep innovating, but this is a highly interconnected industry, The staging of Trump, right? What? Wait, what? The staging of Trump, right? The mirrors of Zeiss? What? What does that mean? The equipment assembly of ASML? What? Yeah, well, we know that about ASML. What's this thing about Trump, right? The mirrors of Zeiss? What does that mean? The staging of Trump, right? The mirrors of... What does that mean? Like, I don't understand what that means. The chemicals and resistance technology in Japan? The mass marketing of Intel? I like how he calls out the mass marketing of Intel. The mass marketing of Intel. That is how they continue to outsell AMD. It's the mass marketing of Intel. All those together, I think this is a 10-year gap, and I think it's a sustainable 10-year gap with the export policies that have been put in place today, and I do believe that the port ends well for the policies that have been established in the world for export and competitiveness in this environment. And we're leaning hard into making sure that's the case. So that's what he said at the World Economic Forum. I don't know. There's already those images online about Chinese companies creating their own processors, and they literally copied Intel's IHS and even Intel's the interposer for the actual die, which is kind of funny when you think about it. But yeah, well, the next thing you know, it works in a Z790 motherboard. Oh boy, I don't know. And the thing is, I don't really know what Intel can do to like counter that, because that's if that's straight up like counterfeit, that's not going to hold up in court. Because if Intel tries to sue like a Chinese startup, the Chinese government can be like, it's too bad, like that's too bad for you guys. Well, what will probably end up happening, if that's the case, the problem with, like, if somebody copies the design, like if some company copies Intel's design and they sell it as their own, and they don't pay Intel any kind of license fee or royalty fee or nothing like that, then if they're protected by their local government, so like, for example, in this hypothetical situation, like if a Chinese startup copies Intel's X86 processor, so let's say they copy Alder Lake or Raptor Lake, and it's such a blatant copy that they can get it to work with a modded BIOS in a Z790 motherboard. Well, Intel could sue them and go to court. It would have to be like an international court, because I don't think, like, the thing is, like, if they try to sue them in China, it depends on what the Chinese government decides to do. The Chinese government is very pro local domestic companies. So the Chinese government could try to mediate in favor of the Chinese company that copied Intel's design. So Intel could end up losing really bad. And what would end up happening though is if they tried to, like, if they sue them in like a U.S. court, or I don't know much about how international court would work, but if they sued them like in the U.S., what could easily happen is the Chinese company would just not be able to sell their products in the U.S. market, or if it's like an international ruling, then they just can only sell their product in China. Or I mean, obviously they could sell them like on the black market thing, just sell them like to North Korea or some other, or like Russia or someplace that wouldn't care purchasing like a counterfeit processor as long as it works. You know, might not be as fast as the Intel, the real deal, but you know, like if it's a cheap alternative, it could still work. So, yeah. So they're saying they're 10 years behind in process technology. So that'll be interesting to see. So anyway, all right, moving on to the next story here. Microsoft's 16 gigabyte baseline for AI PCs to propel memory growth in consumer market. 40% AI server growth in 2024. So this is an interesting story because, hey, Felipe, yeah, we got 9K subs like earlier this week. We're slowly getting there. We're slowly getting to that 10K. Because I think 10K subs is kind of the milestone. Like what? Like you try to do like 10K subs, 100K subs, 500K subs, a million subs. You know, those are kind of the I guess 50,000 subs is also a milestone. But yeah, like 10K is kind of like my goal is to get to like 10K subs. Hopefully, we'll see. Yeah, I don't know. Should I dumb down my material, or do you guys like it being more like very technical focused? Because if I dumb down my material, then I think maybe it would appeal to a wider audience. But then I think I would lose the essence of what the channel is. So I don't really want to do that. It's like sacrifice the essence of the content for more views versus like, and I guess faster growth in the near term versus like genuine deep dive, like technical content. Yeah. No dummies here. Yeah. Felipe is saying no, please. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I don't really want to do that. So I'm just going to keep it the way it is and we'll see. We have some stuff to talk about in the future. I've got content for capture cards planned and USB4, which we are going to talk about on the next story. But yeah, Microsoft 16 gigabytes. So basically, this is going to drive up the minimum requirements for PCs. So a lot of people today believe that 32 gigabytes is kind of like the go-to amount. I would say that's true. Basically, what this story means is that the minimum spec for computers, for desktop, laptop, mobile, whatever. I mean, you guys can see the different processors shown here. You got AMD Ryzen AI, you got Intel Core, you got Snapdragon from Qualcomm, and then you have the Apple M3. 16 gigabytes is what Microsoft is declaring should be the minimum amount of RAM for any PC that's going to feature an AI coprocessor, or what they call an NPU, a neural processing unit. They're calling these things NPUs. Instead of saying CPU or GPU, they call them NPU. I don't like the phrase NPU because if you're somebody who works in IT, if you work in specifically with routers and switches and those sort of things, the acronym NPU typically stands for a network processing unit. So it's basically the router's component that does a lot of the like routing decisions. So it's basically for a router, but a lot of these guys are calling NPUs like neural processing units. So like the AI market is now starting to steal that acronym. And the reality is the mainstream media and the public at large is going to adopt NPU to mean neural processing unit, not network processing unit. So I guess the networking guys, the telecom guys, they're going to have to like start using a different acronym or something like that. I don't know, unless the NPU name never takes off. But for now, Microsoft is saying 16 gigabytes is the minimum amount of RAM for all AI PCs. So what this could mean is that RAM prices could stagnate or slightly go up. Because if the minimum laptop is going to have 16 gigs of RAM instead of 8 gigs of RAM, that's going to increase the demand for pre-builds and laptops, any kind of mobile device. So, what does that mean for like smartphones? Because if smartphones start featuring AI processors in them, and if they're going to require like 16 gigs of RAM as a baseline, then yeah, that DDR5, and it's all DDR5 based, it's going to be expensive, or it's going to increase the demand for memory, and that could cause the price to go up. So just keep that in mind. I personally don't like DDR5. For mobile, it's really dumb because I don't know. The way DDR5 is today, it leaves a lot to be desired. But everything going DDR5 and all this AI stuff, which means you need more RAM, that's just going to make things more expensive. So you can see like this is like an AMD AI accelerator server. And then here's Intel with theirs. Arrow Lake first gaming processor with an AX. I don't know if that's correct. I think the AMD one from last year was the first one. But hey, all you got to do is say you're the first, and as long as you say it enough times, people who don't know any better might believe you. Smartphones have been packing NPUs for a while now. I think it's only used for photo. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, kind of. At the end of the day, the NPU is nothing more than a glorified miniature GPU. Because they say that if you're going to use... I think I watched a video about somebody talking at CES a few weeks ago. They were talking... Or actually it was last week, because that was CES. They were talking about how if you want to run an AI task, if you run it on the NPU, it will run at the expected, like it will complete the task in the expected duration of time required. But if you were to run that exact same task on the dedicated GPU in the exact same system, it would complete the task significantly faster. So NPUs are they're like nice to haves, but I think if you want to run AI, well, we're talking about like AI apps, but if you were to run like if Windows or any OS had its own AI process running and it was designed to use the NPU, if the hardware doesn't have the NPU, I think ideally it would want to run the NPU process off of the integrated GPU, assuming the hardware had an integrated GPU. Because supposedly that's supposed to be faster than the NPU. So it kind of defeats the purpose of the NPU. But I think it's like what Marcelo's saying. It's for photo processing, that kind of stuff. So yeah, for like low power, energy efficiency, like battery life, yeah, the NPU is going to be ideal. But for performance and speed, any kind of integrated GPU doing the exact same thing, or even a dedicated GPU, it's going to be way faster than any NPU. Okay, so that kind of leads us into, this is kind of the last major story, and I wish I would have learned about this like a month ago, but apparently this literally got announced yesterday and today. USB4 PCIe Gen 4 cards are about to come out. I don't know when they're going to come out. I need to like get in touch with Asus and ask them when this thing's coming out, because I really, really need this card. So for those that haven't been following me, like Threadripper, so I had switched over to a Threadripper, Asus-based Threadripper. So this one here, the Pro WS TRX50 Sage Wi-Fi. So this is the motherboard that I currently use with the Threadripper processor that I have. This thing comes with a USB4 header right here. And the thing is, I was under the impression that, okay, they say USB 4, but that means you got to use Thunderbolt because, I mean, look at this pinout. TB underscore force power. TB underscore CIO plug event. TB RTD3 switch. TB this. TB that. What does TB stand for? If we're in regards to USB 4, no, it's not tuberculosis. Don't say tuberculosis. Please don't say tuberculosis. TB stands for Thunderbolt. So this 14-pin header on the Threadripper motherboard from Asus uses the exact same 14-pin found in wait, no, that's not what I wanted to show. This in the Asus Thunderbolt EX4. There's a Thunderbolt 4 add-in card from Asus. So I recently purchased one of these from them, thinking that I could use this with the Threadripper motherboard. Well, as you would guess, it doesn't work. The card is detected. It shows in Windows that the Thunderbolt controller shows that there are 2 ports available. But when I plug stuff in that's supposed to use Thunderbolt or USB 4, those devices don't work. If I plug a cell phone, like if I plug my smartphone in, that works. It charges, it comes up, it works. I can like transfer files over, it works. But if I try to do anything that requires PCIe tunneling, which is a USB 4 specification, it's a USB 4 feature, not necessarily a Thunderbolt feature, it doesn't work. So I've been going back and forth with Asus to try to acknowledge that this is a problem, if they could fix it. But just earlier today, I discover this thing. Asus USB 4 PCIe Gen 4 card. This literally looks like the same exact thing, just without the Thunderbolt name. Now, this is actually different, though. This is physically different because... Now, let's go back to this article. This USB 4 card, unlike the Thunderbolt 4 card, which features, and I've done a lot of videos on what I'm about to say, so if you're someone who's been asking about Thunderbolt, or if you're curious about how to use Thunderbolt, I have like at least 2 videos, I think there's 3 videos, one for Gigabyte, one for ASRock, and another one for like an AverMedia Thunderbolt external 4K capture card. I've done like 3 videos on this topic for Thunderbolt 4 specifically. But now we're moving to USB 4. So the difference is the Thunderbolt card features the Intel JHL 8540 chipset from Intel. Because remember, Intel invented Thunderbolt at Apple's request. So Apple was like, hey, you guys are good with hardware. Can you make something that doesn't look terrible? You know, like something good? You know, like not USB Type A, because that's trash. Can you make something that looks sleek so we can put it on our MacBooks and people will think it's cool? And so Intel was like, oh, yeah, okay. So let's make this thing. Okay, Thunderbolt. It's cool. So Apple was the primary customer of Intel for Thunderbolt back in the day when it first came out. And I think it was like 2012, somewhere around there. And then Thunderbolt 2 came out after that. Then Thunderbolt 3 came out. Thunderbolt 3 was significantly better than Thunderbolt 1 and Thunderbolt 2. Thunderbolt 3 is what can allow you to do 40 gigabit speed. It was Thunderbolt 3. And then what Intel did was they donated the Thunderbolt 3 specification. I say the word donate, but they essentially allowed it to go a public domain for the USB I think the USB-IF, the International Forum for the USB spec. So, and that is what Thunderbolt 4 is based off of. So Thunderbolt 4 is primarily based off of Thunderbolt 3 technology, but it with a twist, because Thunderbolt 3 requires 4 lanes of PCI Gen 3 for the bandwidth. Now Thunderbolt 4 can be either 4 lanes of PCI Gen 3, or it could be 4 lanes of PCI Gen 4. So technically, USB 4 could do, more than 40 gigabit speeds, but the way that I've seen them implement these chipsets, they're all 40 gigabit based. So, and this one's going to be no different. It says right here. So if we go back to the article, Asus, and it's not just Asus, actually MSI is the very first one to market. And we can talk about MSI's implementation, because if you're really someone who wants USB 4 today, the only option is MSI, and MSI currently does not sell as a standalone product. If you want a USB 4 add-in card, you have to buy an Intel, this is what's laughable, you have to buy an Intel Z790 motherboard from MSI that bundles the USB 4 add-in card. And the thing that's really bizarre about all of this is the fact that MSI is not using the Intel chipset for their Z790 motherboard add-in card. They're using the AverMedia USB 4 chipset for their USB 4 add-in card, and they're bundling it with an Intel motherboard. You can probably assume that Intel's not too thrilled about MSI's decision to do that. Why? Because Intel typically offers a bundle. They offer like volume discount if you're gonna, like, let's say you're gonna buy, let's say you're MSI and you want to manufacture a bunch of Z790 motherboards to go with Intel's 14th gen Raptor Lake. Well, Intel might cut you a deal and say, hey, Mr. MSI, if you want to buy like, 10,000 Z790 chipsets, we'll throw in, like 5,000 Thunderbolt 4 chipsets if you want at like X% discount, and MSI's like, actually, no thanks. We're just gonna buy the Z790s from you. We don't need the Thunderbolt. And then what they do is they just turn around and they buy like a bunch of USB 4 from AverMedia. So you can tell Intel's not too happy about that. So, but it's interesting now because we're finally getting the highly elusive AverMedia USB 4 chipset. Here we go. In terms of specification, Asus's, and this is also true of MSI, Asus's USB 4 add-in card features an AverMedia ASM 4242. That is easy to memorize. ASM 4242. That is such an easy number. Okay. It was so hard for me to memorize Intel JHL8540. JHL8540 is the Thunderbolt 4 chipset. This ASM 4242 is the AverMedia USB 4 chipset, or the controller, which is similar to what we saw in MSI's counterpart. So I'm going to open that one for later. The card features PCI Gen 4 X4. So this is already an upgrade to Intel's JHL8540, because the JHL8540 is PCI 3.0 X4. So this is the reason why I've been telling you guys. This goes back to the video I made several months ago about the tier list for the motherboards. When I was talking about X670 tier list, B650 tier list. Remember, guys, I put a lot of value into motherboards that offer PCI X4 slots, specifically that number, X4 interface. Why? Because if you want USB 4 for whatever reason, You're going to need a X4 slot minimum to use USB4 40 gigabit speed. You cannot install this in an X1 slot or an X2 slot. It must be X4 or higher. You can install it in an X8 and it'll work. You're wasting half of those lanes, but it will work. You can even install it in an X16 and waste like 3/4 of your lanes, but it'll work. So that's the reason why I grade those motherboards the way I did. A lot of people were like, well, what about the VRMs? Well, who cares with the VRMs? Because the Ryzen 7000 stuff doesn't even use that much power. So that's why I didn't grade the VRMs too heavily. But if it didn't have one of these, it's not going to be in like A tier or S tier because, you know, this is kind of a must-have for a lot of content creators, for a lot of people. Even if you're not going to do USB 4. If you want a 4K capture card, you have to have 4 lanes. So it's an important thing to have on a motherboard in 2024. So X4 lanes, and it comes with 40 gigabit bi-directional bandwidth. It comes with 2 USB Type-C. But remember, this is 40 gigabit USB Type-C, which can be connected to support up to 5 USB 4 devices in a daisy chain. That means you could, in theory, you could use one port on this card to give yourself 5 monitors. 5 monitors off of one USB 4 port. All daisy chained one by one. So if you're somebody who does, for example, high frequency day trading or crypto trading or whatever, you're going to want all of those displays because you're going to be monitoring like the Nikkei, the Nasdaq, the Dow Jones. You got all that stuff on all these different screens, and you're just like, you know how it is. So anyway, for additional support, or if you're like in content creation, or if you're in like studio production, video production for like a movie studio, you would daisy chain a bunch of displays. You might have, or if you're like in the news networks, you might daisy chain displays because you have your teleprompter display facing to the person, to the host, to the news anchors, etc. Whatever. You got another one going here. You want one for the editor, one for the senior editor. You got one up there. So, you know, like this is nice to have. You could also do storage. You could daisy chain a bunch of external storage this way. So for additional support, both of the Type-C connections are compatible with 20 volt 3 amp connection. That means you can provide 60 watts of charging to a smartphone or any device that can be powered off of the USB 4 interface. So which makes the Asus Atom card stand out among the options available on the market. Yeah, I don't know if the MSI one has this. We can look at that one here in a little bit. Yeah, here's the MSI one. Oh, the MSI one has it too. So they're basically the same thing. So MSI is claiming 100 watts of power. MSI recently launched its Z790 Max motherboards for Intel's 14th gen Raptor Lake refresh, which come with its latest USB 4 add-in card, which offers impressive transfer speeds. This is kind of weird. It's like, now I get why they're doing this, but what I would expect to see later on this year when Zen 5 launches, what I expect is a lot of the AMD, whatever the new chipset is going to be for that accompanies Zen 5, it's probably going to be called X770 and B850 or something, right? Like, those are going to be the chipsets. I would expect that some of those flagship motherboards will either include this bundled in the box with the motherboard, or more likely what we could see is this chipset could be natively integrated into the motherboard. Because some of the motherboards from the previous generation already have USB 4 in them, but they're not using the AverMedia chip. They're all using the Intel JHL Thunderbolt 4, which was really, really weird because it's like you buy an AMD motherboard or an Intel motherboard, but if it's an Intel, then it's fine because it's Thunderbolt, and that's an Intel thing. But if you buy an AMD motherboard with the Intel JHL 8540, it was literally a coin toss of whether or not the full feature set would work the way you expect it to. In the case of ASRock, it works as expected. In the case of Gigabyte, it mostly works as expected, with a few exceptions. With Asus, it works as expected. So, and MSI avoided Intel's JHL 8540 for some unknown reason. You couldn't get Thunderbolt on Intel with MSI, and you couldn't get USB 4 / Thunderbolt 3 / Thunderbolt 4, whatever you want to call it, on MSI for AMD. So, for whatever reason, MSI avoided the Intel chipset altogether and waited for AverMedia. And now they're basically basking in the glory of AverMedia because they're the first ones to market with this USB 4 card bundled with a Z790 motherboard. So I would expect the same kind of bundle to be available on the Zen 5 motherboard to come out later this year. Especially because USB 4 is, at this point, USB 4 is synonymous with Ryzen. It's like anytime somebody says USB 4, it's always referring to Ryzen because you're not allowed to say Thunderbolt and Ryzen in the same sentence. That's like a politically incorrect statement. You know, like, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to make an analogy to something else. But it's supposedly, it's wrong. It's politically incorrect to say Thunderbolt and AMD or Thunderbolt and Ryzen in the same sentence. If you don't plug the 6-pin in, does it still provide 60? No, and the Asus one has the plug. Yeah, Asus has a 6-pin on theirs too. It's just Asus has like a fancy backplate on theirs, or I guess like a shroud covering the chip. But yeah, both of them have the 6-pin for quick charge. So yeah, if you don't plug in the 6-pin is optional. You don't need to plug that in. You just won't get the 100 watt or the 60 watt charging. Apparently, MSI's offers 100 watts. Asus only offers 60 watts. This is basically exactly the same as the Intel Thunderbolt because it offers the same exact thing. It's like, here, let's look at the actual product page. So let's look at Intel's Thunderbolt or Asus's Intel Thunderbolt card. So this thing comes with, oh look, you can daisy chain up to 5 devices. Daisy chain up to 5 devices. And then what does it show on the USB 4? This is like the generic one. It's like Thunderbolt is like the brand name. Thunderbolt's like the brand name. USB 4 is like the generic. You know, it's like the generic one. But if you look, it's like the same exact thing. You can do, oh look, it looks exactly the same. It has the DisplayPort input. It has the USB-C out. It has the quick charge. Speeding, USB 4 port, blah, blah, blah. Daisy chain up to 5 devices. Supports 8K Ultra via DisplayPort 1.4. 1 cable, multiple devices, 40 gigabit speed. It's exactly the same as Thunderbolt 4. So when I was asking Asus support, like, hey guys, can you please turn on PCI tunneling in your BIOS for the Threadripper motherboard so I can use my Thunderbolt card with it? They're like, well, Thunderbolt's not supported. They immediately start trying to shut me down, saying Thunderbolt's not supported. And I told them, you know, like, I'm not doing anything with Thunderbolt. I just want to use the USB-C 40 gigabit on the card. Like, I don't care about the Thunderbolt thing. Like, just turn on PCI tunneling. They have some kind of hard lock in their BIOS that it's like, oh, this is an unsupported card, so we can't turn on all the features. So, yeah. And when I asked them, can you please tell me if I can't use this Thunderbolt thing, what is the thing that I'm supposed to buy from you so that I can use USB 4 with my Threadripper motherboard? They couldn't tell me. Well, the answer is this thing. But the funny thing is, This literally only got announced last night or earlier today. So I'm sorry to all the Asus support people that couldn't answer this question because now that I know that you guys didn't even know the answer, like you legitimately didn't know the answer, it's really Asus's fault for not informing their support people that hey, we got a product that's about to come out, so just tell the customers that they need to buy one of these. So I'm gonna go back to those support people. I'm gonna ask them, when is this gonna be on the market? Because you guys couldn't answer my question. Now that I can literally link to you the actual card, when can I get one? Or you gonna send me a review sample? You know, like just send me a review sample. If I have to send it back, I mean, whatever, I'll send it back. But I mean, I'll end up having to buy one because I want to actually use this legitimately in the actual motherboard. So, you know, whatever. Yeah, but this will make good video content because I feel like people underestimate what you can actually do with USB4. You can do let's just say you can do a lot more with a normal looking USB Type C port. You can do a lot more with this special USB-C port than you can do with like a regular USB-C port. The used card you bought for the yeah, I have it and I was using it. It's basically I bought one of these. It didn't work. I mean, okay, well that's a long story. Basically, I used the used card. It didn't well, it works, but it doesn't work correctly. It's hard to explain. It doesn't allow me to use PCI tunneling because Asus like hard locks it in the BIOS and there's no way to turn it on in the BIOS. So I asked them, can you guys give me like a BIOS update or just do an update that like exposes the option to enable PCI tunneling in the BIOS? And they're like, they haven't answered my question yet. So that's my next question. But now that I know that they have this thing, I know that this will solve all the problems, or supposedly this should solve all the problems. Unless they legitimately have like a firmware bug with their BIOS in that Threadripper board, that it doesn't matter if I use this or the Thunderbolt. If it does the same thing, then they clearly have a problem. It's just if I test with the USB4 card, they can't try to shut me down saying it's unsupported because Thunderbolt's not allowed to work on AMD. You know, like I can literally show them this. It's like, hey, you've got a Thunderbolt pinout in your manual for the Threadripper motherboard. Even though it says USB4 header, it's literally using the exact same 14 pin. So what that means is, see this pin here? I don't know if I can zoom in more. So, okay, maybe that's too much. But like this Thunderbolt card has a 14 pin that plugs into the card and plugs into the motherboard. The Threadripper motherboard has the same header that works with Thunderbolt. So in my mind, this should work. But they're saying no, it's not supported. Okay, well if that's the case, look at this one. So you guys have a USB 4 card. Well, guess what? The USB 4 card comes with the 14 pin. That is the exact same 14 pin cable found with the... Does this have the same sort of image? Okay, so the Thunderbolt page doesn't show all this stuff. It does in the manual. But that's the exact same thing. Like, if we go to the... Like, we go here. Go to the manual. See, like, okay. This is the reason why they were trying to, like, shut me down. Because they come in here, they're like, okay, let's look at what this. Okay, card compatible list. Intel Z790 stuff. Intel B760. Intel H770, Intel Z690, Intel W680. I don't even know what this is. Is that supposed to be Sapphire Rapids? I could never find those. Intel B660, Intel H670, Intel Z590, Intel H570, and so you get the picture. There's a bunch of Intel. But okay, here's the AMD stuff. So you can use Thunderbolt on some AMD. So AMD B550, that's AM4. That's like Zen 3 and older. AMD X670, so the Strix E-E, which is the best one for the Asus ones, that does not include USB4 natively, because the Crosshair Hero and the Extreme already have this Thunderbolt chipset soldered on to the Crosshair motherboards. So, but these don't. So the Strix can add it. So can the Tough and the Prime, some of them. And then some AMD B650 chipsets. So basically, yeah, if you have a Asus X670 or B650, then you're good. But if you have an Asus Threadripper like I do, sorry, you're not on the list. So that's why they're telling me, nah, it's not supported. It's not going to work. Well, it's okay. Then why is this? Why are you guys using Thunderbolt pinouts in your manual? And it's like, okay, I plugged it in to this specific slot, just like they said, and it still didn't work. So it's like I've already done all the things, and it doesn't work. So now that I know that this thing exists, this is the answer. So this is the thing that I'll need to use at some point. So basically, expect to see videos on the channel about the Asus USB4 PCIe card at some point in the future. I just need to figure out when this thing is going to be available and if they'll send me a review sample. If not, that's fine. I'm going to need one of these anyway, permanently. So if I have to buy one, that's fine. I'm going to return this Thunderbolt one because this was kind of a waste of money now that I know this doesn't work. What I'm going to do with this, though, just to rule out it being defective, I'm going to test it on where is it? This motherboard, because I actually have access to this motherboard. I have a Intel Z590 Tough Gaming Z590 plus Wi-Fi. So I don't personally have the motherboard right now, but I know someone that does because I helped build them this PC 2 years ago or something. So I'll be able to get access to that motherboard. I'm just basically gonna ask them, hey, can I test this Thunderbolt card in your motherboard real quick? I just want to make sure that it's not defective, because my problem was I couldn't rule out whether or not it was defective because I only could test it on my Threadripper motherboard, which doesn't have official support per Asus's list. So yeah, I want to make sure that it actually works, but I'm probably still gonna end up returning it because I don't really need it at this point. So I wish somebody like Linus or whoever went to CES, I wish they would have made a video about this, because I have an assumption that this was probably shown off at Asus's booth. And there was that whole video that we looked at, a 40-minute video of JJ from Asus showing Paul from Paul's Hardware all this really cool stuff, and whether or not they had the USB4 card there, he just completely forgot about it, assuming it was even at the show. So anyway, speaking of other devices that require 4 lanes, and this is probably going to be the final story of the evening, AverMedia has finally launched the Live Gamer Ultra 2.1 internal capture card. This is a 4K 60 with HDR support capture card, and on top of that, it allows 4K 144 hertz or 144 hertz pass through. So that is a decent upgrade to the previous generation Live Gamer 4K, because that one couldn't do 4K 144 pass through, whereas this can. Also, this supports HDMI. As the name implies, it's called Live Gamer Ultra 2.1. The 2.1 stands for HDMI 2.1. So this supports HDMI 2.1 input and output. which is why it's a decent upgrade to the previous generation, which was only HDMI, I think 2.0. So it requires PCI Gen 3 X4. So again, it needs an X4 slot. That's the reason why X4 slots are really important. But it's PCI Gen 3. So it's basically, this requires twice the bandwidth as the old AverMedia card. Because the one that I use, so if you guys have ever watched me live stream, and if I'm playing a game from the PlayStation 5, like if I'm live streaming a PS5 game, like we looked at the Tekken 8 demo recently, I'm using an AverMedia capture card. Now, the one I'm using is the predecessor to this one. This is the next generation of what I currently use. I use a Live Gamer 4K. This is the 4K 2.1. So this is like the newer one. It's priced pretty good at $270. That's kind of expensive. The old one, you can get the old one now for like less than $200. It's like $160, $150 typically, which is kind of a lot of money. But the thing is, you gotta keep in mind, it's a 4K 60 HDR capture card. So that, I mean, that's pretty good. And if you want to do like 1440p capture, you can capture like 1440, 144. You can capture like 1080p. I think this one can capture 1080p 240. So it can get a lot of FPS on a recording. So you can get some pretty smooth gameplay. It costs the same as a 7600. Yeah, I know, right? Like, yeah. Yeah. So it is kind of pricey. But it supports a lot of other things. The other thing, too, that it supports, that I might add, is it also supports variable refresh rate. The original card did not support VRR or FreeSync over HDMI. This one does support VRR, aka FreeSync on HDMI. So that's another good upgrade. So okay, so here are the specs. It can do, let's kind of zoom in here. It can do, these are all the input resolutions that it supports. Pass through, it can do 1080p at 360 hertz with HDR or VRR enabled. 1440p at 240 hertz. Okay, so this is actually a lot better than the old card. The old card, if I remember correctly, you could do 1080p at like 240. This can do 360. And then 1440 at 240. I think the old one could do 1440 120 if with like a firmware update. And it also supports VRR. And then 4K, it can do 4K 144 pass-through. So this is really nice for like a dual PC stream setup. And the other thing new, this one actually supports ultra-wide at 120 hertz. The old card, as far as I remember, doesn't even support ultra-wide at all. So capture resolutions, you can capture... So this is the recorded footage. So the recorded footage can be 4K 60 or 1440 120, 1080 120. So basically you can do like the high frame rate recordings. And then the video color formats. So overall, I think it's nice. Let's see what they say on here. You can expect to see me do a video on this probably very soon. I will be testing this out at some point. So it comes with the capture card. Right there, you can see, I like that it's low profile, which means I can put this underneath my graphics card and it won't like choke the graphics card from air. Because the older card is wider. It's like all the way across the bracket. And then it has an HDMI cable included. This is an actual 2.1 rated cable, so it's a pretty good cable. It's high-speed certified. And then you get all this extra stuff here. The packaging, closer examination, internals. All right, here we go. So this is it. I really like that it's low profile. It has a back plate. The original one did not have a back plate, although it did have a full shroud on the front like this. You can see it's 4 lanes physically. It needs 4 lanes electrically of PCI Gen 3 bandwidth. The old card was 4 lanes of PCI Gen 2 bandwidth. And then you have your HDMI in and your pass-through out. Is a GPU with HDMI input to act as a capture card feasible, or companies just don't do it because the market is... So long ago, there was a GPU that did what you're asking. It was called the Radeon. It was an ATI Radeon All-in-Wonder. It had a video input, but I can't remember the interface. It might have been S-Video. I have to go back and look, but there was an ATI Radeon that had an input. I don't think it was HDMI input. It was like S-Video or something. They also used to have like TV tuner cards, if you remember those, from like the early 2000s and the mid 2000s. I know ATI made some Radeon All-in-Wonders that could do that. I don't know if nvidia ever made those. Now that I think about it, I think it was like an ATI thing. So it says the card communicates to the system via PCI Express Gen 3 X4. The front panel has a blah blah blah. Okay, so we know. And it has an RGB. It has a full RGB light bar on the side. So when you install it in here, that's how it looks. So, but see how you need an X4 slot. So depending on your motherboard, depending on how... This is why I don't like the really fat GPUs anymore, because look at that. The nice thing about this AverMedia card, though, is because it's lower profile, it's not completely choking off the air from this fan for the GPU. So I really like that smaller form factor. I think it looks a lot better. It looks like they also have like an AE5 Plus. I don't know what that is. That might be another capture card. I think that's another capture card. Or it might be like a... I don't think it's a network card. I don't know what that is. Oh, so they actually removed the shroud. Okay, that's cool. I've never actually looked under here. So you can see all the LEDs. This white section is all the RGB LEDs. And then there's like another cover there. And then you've got the AverMedia. And then a Realtek chip. It looks like a Realtek. Yeah, that's the Realtek logo, and then it has an AverMedia. That's surprising. Wasn't expecting to see that. Oh, it's a sound card. Okay. So they got a sound card in there. You know what? That's something that I could put in the Threadripper. I've got so many PCIe slots on this motherboard. I could actually put a sound card in there. Although, like, realistically, because of how thick the GPU is, I can't use the second slot. The GPU is too big. It covers up the second slot. So that gives me the bottom three. The USB4 / Thunderbolt card has to go in the fourth slot. It's mandatory per the manual. So when it says PCIe X16 G4, G4 stands for Gen 4, and it has to be the first Gen 4, which is basically it's basically that slot there. Because you got Gen 5.1, Gen 5.2, Gen 5.3, then you have Gen 4.1 and Gen 4.2. Now, Gen 4.1 is an X4. Gen 4.2, down here at the very bottom, is on full X16. So that's why they want you to put it in the 4 slot up there, because it only uses 4 lanes. So they don't want you to, like, waste, like, 12 lanes of bandwidth at the very bottom. So yeah, typically what I'm probably going to do is if I could do like the XTX referenced on the top, nothing in the second one. And I could do the AverMedia capture card in this one or the USB4 card whenever that shows up. And then I could put the Intel A770 at the very bottom because it's a dual slot. It'll just overhang here. And that's where it'll go, because that's full 16 lanes. And that leaves this third slot for some other stuff. Like if I want to put in a sound card, if I want to put in like an NVMe card or another capture card or whatever, I could put that in there. That's the nice thing about having all these slots. You can't really do that on a standard Ryzen or Intel motherboard. So yeah, I could put a sound card in this third slot. All right, software and setup. Okay, so they have like the Assist Central. They've got the gaming utility. And their software is actually quite good. Like, AverMedia's software is actually pretty good. Like, even if you're not going to do any live streaming, and you just want to do, like, recording gameplay from, like, a PlayStation 5 or a Series X or any of that kind of stuff, like, you could literally just use the Rec Central software that they have, and it would work fine. In fact, you could even live stream using their Rec Central app. But it's, I don't know, like, I'm not used to using it. I always just use OBS, but you could use this as well. Yeah, see, like the Rec Central, it looks kind of like OBS. So it's got the record, it has the stream option as well. You can add overlays, you can add like different video inputs like the webcam or a camera or whatever. So, hey software, we're just talking about this new capture card. Yeah, and then it works with OBS. This is exactly how I would be using it if I was going to use it with OBS. So it works pretty good overall. Let's see, performance. Okay, so from the testing, the performance is identical to the external AverMedia Live Gamer Ultra 2.1. So I have this one. I already have this one. Actually, I think I need to do a video about that one. They recently did a firmware update on the external one, so it works a whole lot better than it did at launch. I feel like when it launched, it did not launch ready. Like it didn't have support for AverMedia's own software, so you had to use it with OBS or an external application for video capture. It was kind of tedious. It also was, depending on which USB-C port you plugged it into, it could, like, audio. I ran into like audio desyncing issues. So that's why I never actually switched over to their external card. I kept using the old Live Gamer 4K internal card for production because I ran into all these weird like latency issues with their USB-C based one. But thankfully there was an update BIOS recently, and from what I've been able to test, they've also added support for their external Live Gamer Ultra 2.1 with their Rec Central. And ever since they did that, all the weird audio desyncing issues, latency issues, all of that has been resolved from my own testing. So now I think I'm able to make a more positive video about it. So I might actually revisit that. Do I collect capture cards? No, not really. I mean, you'd be surprised how useful they can be. So, like, for example, I use an external capture card for the big camera instead of like a webcam. Or I could just use a webcam. But if I want to use the big camera and have like a zoom, or if I was going to do a video where I'm like showing stuff on the ground, like when we did the live stream of the builds, for example, the capture card came in handy for that. Because I had like a webcam for like the close-up one for the motherboard. And then I had the big camera on a capture card for that. But by using the external capture card, I don't have to mess with my PlayStation 5 because I have the PlayStation 5 on another capture card. So that's why capture cards can be very useful if you're doing live streaming or production type of things. You could also use a capture card to stream off one PC and play. Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So you could do dual PC streaming. Now, that could come in handy if you wanted to, for example, like if you wanted to stream at 4K resolution, like native 4K, you could have a dedicated PC that has the capture card and literally pushes the amount of bitrate required, as well as doing the encoding of the live stream to YouTube or Twitch or whatever the source is. And then like you have the gaming PC as the actual PC that's playing the game. That way you don't have any dropped frame rate from using the GPU for the stream because you're using another PC to do that. Or back in the day when people mostly relied on CPU encoding, dual PC streaming was far more common if you wanted to stream at like full 1080p, because back in the day you couldn't stream at 1080p without an 8-core CPU, at least not without good quality. Like if you wanted good quality, you had to use dual PCs. You had to use an 8 core, like a Ryzen 1800X or something, or like an Intel $1,000 Broadwell E 6900K. You had to use something like that, or a Haswell E. You know, like you had to use an expensive amount of hardware just to stream at 1080p like a good 8 years ago. So we've come a long way, and most of that's thanks to NVIDIA pushing GPU encoding as kind of the new standard, and as well as AMD doing like the higher core count CPUs on Ryzen for relatively low price compared to how Intel used to charge for like their 8 cores. So it's really AMD first with the Ryzen 7s, and then NVIDIA second with the 20 series in particular. That's when NVIDIA's GPU encoding actually got good, so to speak. Because prior to Turing, CPU was the way to go. Like if you were serious about quality of streaming, like the image quality, you were using either dual PC or you were using like a Ryzen 8 core from like first gen Ryzen. So, but yeah, capture cards are integral to being able to do dual PC. You have to have a capture card for dual PC. And the fact that this thing is really nice because this thing allows 4K 144 pass through, right? So 4K 144 pass through. Or if you want to record like 240 hertz or 140 or 120 hertz, 120 frames, right? Like you can do that with the lower resolutions. And variable refresh works on this as well. So what is this? This is the measured input lag, capture card HDMI. This is, what is this? The milliseconds? This is the, I don't know how they're determining. This is interesting. They have on-display lag, total input lag, render time, USB polling delay. So what I know is this is kind of like, it's around anywhere from 30 milliseconds. But it's not really that noticeable. And if you're using pass-through, you don't actually have any input lag. And if you're using dual PC, you also don't have any input lag because the input lag only applies in the recorded footage or if you're trying to actually use the preview window to play the game. So says the overall performance for the Live Gamer 4K 2.1 is outstanding. The colors of the recording look vibrant and there are no apparent motion or compression artifacts or pixelization. Anything that might look off in the example is added by YouTube's compression. Yeah, and I agree with this. I mean, I've been using the Live Gamer 4K basically since it launched years ago. And yeah, I'm definitely going to make some videos about this at some point. If Blackmagic has any cards that fit your use case, you could grab one of those just for... yeah, possibly. But their cards tend to be very expensive, though. So, like, and a lot of their stuff, I don't really know... It doesn't really fit a lot of my use case, because really all I need is a capture card that can record at 4K 60, and it's nice to have HDR. It's nice to have all the pass-through, 144 hertz, 4K, etc. Or if you're doing 1440, you're doing like, what did they say? Like 120 capture, 240 pass-through. So it's like, it supports all the standards, and then VRR support, HDR support. So it's like, that's really all I need. So the DaVinci, or the Blackmagic design capture cards are way more involved in terms of what they can do, from what I can tell. It's been a while since I've looked at them, though. But yeah, I could revisit those. It's just I don't really have a use case for a lot of what I saw from the Blackmagic capture cards. And they're really expensive, and they're really large. This is kind of small. It doesn't block the fan from my GPU. So I think this is kind of the way to go. The external one is good, but I feel like if I was going to recommend somebody a capture card for, like, if they wanted to become like the next Kick streamer or Twitch streamer, and you want a capture card so you can like stream Xbox exclusives or PlayStation 5 exclusives when they're out, I would recommend an internal capture card. Just because of all my experience over the years using capture cards, both internal and external, what I can tell you is I have never had issues with audio going desynced from the video with an internal capture card. Occasionally, I have ran into those problems with USB external capture cards. In particular, there's one from Elgato that I've never been able to resolve those issues. So that's why I don't really use that one for audio capture anymore. I only use it for video. And I did have rare audio desyncing in OBS with AverMedia's recent USB-C based version of this capture card, although they have a firmware update that fixed all of that. So that's the reason why I prefer AverMedia. Now, Elgato is supposed to release their next generation capture cards next month. So if you're someone who is a big fan of Elgato, you're probably going to want to wait for those and see how those turn out. But when it comes to me personally, I've used Elgato and I've used AverMedia. AverMedia has never let me down. So I always go AverMedia for that reason. I've tested Elgato's external and Elgato's internal, and both times I've had issues with software. Their software gets weird audio problems. I don't know why. I've tested these in multiple computers, so it's not just one computer. So I don't really trust Elgato that much. Like, to me, Elgato's track record when it comes to capture cards leaves a lot to be desired. Where I think Elgato shines is in their other things. So, like, their portable green screens, their lighting systems, their Stream Deck thing that they sell. Like, that's where Elgato is really good. But when it comes to the capture cards, AverMedia is significantly more reliable from both a software and a firmware standpoint. So, that being said, I do expect to be doing a video on this specific capture card. I will also have to go backtrack and do some content on the older external one that I have. Probably featuring the Threadripper system for both of these, because I have enough PCIe slots available to test both of them simultaneously. So, plus some other stuff like USB4. So yeah, it seems like the Threadripper system is going to be featured in a lot more video content in the near future than I expected. I was expecting to use the Ryzen stuff or maybe the Intel Z790. I might actually feature Intel Z790 in a video for Thunderbolt, because I have been testing Thunderbolt on the Z790 recently, and that was working as expected. So, plus, I do want to add Gigabyte. Gigabyte recently had a BIOS update that changed their UEFI significantly in terms of the color theme and some places on the easy mode. I learned this through one of my viewers, one of the members in the Discord. Shout out to Vampire. Vampire did a BIOS update recently to the latest Gigabyte BIOS, and I saw how that looked. I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm going to update all of my Gigabyte motherboards too. So I recently updated the Z790, the X670E, both of them, and they're now on the latest Gigabyte BIOS. And both of them, both AMD and Intel Gigabyte boards, have the new look. They have this new UEFI look, which actually looks pretty cool. And they have like a really nice layout for the easy mode. It takes some getting used to when you first look at it, but I think it's easy. There's like an easy toggle for resizable bar. There's an easy toggle for XMP or Expo. There's like a quick button for the favorites. There's one for the fan profile. So I may do a video on that. I don't know how much demand there is for a video about Gigabyte's new UEFI interface, but maybe, because it's more tech related. It's more like in depth, I guess, or more niche than typical videos talking about graphics cards all the time. So maybe something like that. But with that being said, that's pretty much it for this week's live stream. So if anybody has any questions about anything we covered, now will be the time. So I'll bring it up to the chat for any questions here. Any build advice, questions about capture cards, questions about Thunderbolt, USB4, motherboards, etc. Can you join the VC after the stream is over? Yeah, I could probably join. Well, I could probably join for a short while. Aside from capture cards, sound cards. So I don't have any sound cards. I don't have any sound cards. GPU's USB4 and NVMe. I don't have NVMe cards either yet. At least not yet. Is there any other useful peripheral that plugs into the PCI? Well, okay. Network cards. You could plug in, if you want 10 gigabit or higher, like if you want 100 gigabit networking over like an optical interface, yes, you could do that in a PCIe card. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff. Like when I think of PCIe, I think of GPUs. That's like the first thing that's so obvious. But yeah, I think of USB4, NVMe, capture cards. I don't really think of sound cards, but yeah, you can put sound cards in them as well. They still make them apparently. Oh, you got the Creative Sound Blaster? Yeah, I know like RK was looking at sound cards recently for his Threadripper motherboard because he had the extra slots. Yeah, I don't know about sound cards because I've never really needed to use a sound card, but I don't do a lot with like sound editing. That would be an interesting use case. But I know like network cards, like for example, I did a video last year on 10 gigabit. Like if you wanted to add 10 gigabit to an Aorus Master or an Aorus Elite AX, you can add a 10 gigabit network card to those. Is a USB sound card aimed at headphones? Oh, it's a USB sound card aimed at headphones. So you plug in like a USB based headset? Oh, no, I know what you mean. You're talking about, I think I know what you mean. It's like a small, well, that wouldn't be a PCIe. I'm thinking like a USB sound card. A USB sound card is like a USB, it looks like a USB thumb drive, but it has like the microphone and the headphone input or output jacks, the 3.5 millimeters. I think I know what you're talking about, Nero. But we're talking about sound cards that plug into a PCIe slot, which are typically an X1 slot. Are you guys getting sound cards just to fill the slot? No. In the case of RK, like RK needed optical. So in the case of RK, TRX50, let's go to this page here. So the problem with this Gigabyte Threadripper board is it was not really a problem. Well, the problem is, where's the back panel? So here's the issue with this board, as you can see. So, well, okay, zooming in doesn't really help, does it? That's weird. So if you look at this Gigabyte Aero D, it has the microphone and it has the line out. Now, the thing that people don't know though, so on here, obviously there's no optical. There's no SPDIF. And RK has like a sound setup for SPDIF. And this motherboard doesn't have SPDIF. So he would need to add a sound card that has the optical audio. That's why he needs a sound card, because this motherboard doesn't have the SPDIF on the back. Now, this, I do want to point out though, this, I recently found out that this port, the line out, is a line out. It is not like a stereo out. So you can actually drive a 5.1 audio system off of this motherboard. It's in the manual. You have to do like a specific setup where you set it up in the operating system. You install the Realtek software, and then what it does is, like, if you set up 5.1, the line out is the 4 channels. So it's like left, right, rear, and then you also have a subwoofer and center off of the microphone port, if I remember correctly. So instead of plugging a microphone in here, you would actually plug your subwoofer and your center for your 5.1 system in here. So you can do analog 5.1 off of this motherboard, even though it looks like it doesn't have it. So I found that out recently. That was actually kind of interesting. So, because I was thinking, man, why are all these motherboards lacking like 5.1 on them? Well, they do have it. They just do it in a really weird, kind of like I don't know, it's a strange way. I still prefer if they had like all the plugs on there, but I guess they're doing it to, I don't know. It's because the Realtek chipset is different now. The ALC codec thing that it uses. Hey Max, so you're still using the PCI sound card? Oh, PCI sound card? Hey, wait, you mean PCIe sound card? PCI sound card is like really old. I don't even know if the B350 has PCI on it. I know like the Bulldozer motherboards had like FX8150 and 8350. Those motherboards, some of them, those had PCI slots on them. Oh wow, it's PCI? What? Okay. Okay. I didn't know that the Ryzen boards had PCI on them. I guess the first generation probably still had them. You're using the G6 through USB and optical? Yeah. Yeah, I don't know why this didn't come with optical audio. That is bizarre. Yeah. The Gigabyte board actually, like this one is still technically, in my opinion, even though I'm not using this one anymore, although I was able to confirm via somebody on Reddit, for whatever that's worth. You know, like whenever you go to Reddit for all of your information, that is already questionable. But per Reddit, the newer revisions. So notice how this one is Rev 1.0. So the reason why I returned my Gigabyte TRX50 Aero D to Micro Center, I basically, for those that don't know, if you guys remember, I did a live stream build for Threadripper featuring this motherboard. But since then, I have actually swapped it for an Asus Sage. However, and the reason why I did was because this motherboard didn't have suspended RAM. For some reason, it didn't have suspended RAM. And Gigabyte kept telling me, oh, well, you got to do an RMA or you have to exchange it for a newer revision. So I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to go to Micro Center. I'm just going to, do a swap. But it's like, I don't trust you guys. I'm not going to swap for like another Gigabyte board. I'm just going to go get a different brand. So I'm like, hey, let's swap to the Asus. They had one Asus Sage in stock. All their other Threadripper boards were all Gigabyte Aero D. So I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to get the Sage. And the Sage has suspended RAM. The Sage, like basically all those weird issues with sleep not being available, that was resolved. However, per Reddit, somebody on Reddit was able to confirm that revision 1.1, which is, it looks almost identical to the 1.0, per an individual on Reddit with the 1.1 board, they claim that Rev 1.1 does have suspend to RAM, which aka sleep mode or S3 standby mode, for those that are familiar with the different sleep states for an operating system. So supposedly Rev 1.1 has sleep, so technically I could go and return my Asus board and swap back to Gigabyte, but I would only ever do that if they have Rev 1.1. But at this point, I've gotten so used to the Sage because of all these extra PCIe slots that I'm probably just going to stick it out and keep the Sage. My complaints with the Sage are as follows. So the Sage board has a BIOS that looks like it's from 2005. So you guys know how Asus has the fancy looking ROG and Strix and Tough and all those themes depending on the motherboard in terms of how the BIOS looks? No, this thing, their Sage flagship Threadripper board has a BIOS that has no mouse support. It literally looks like the type of BIOS from a computer from the mid 2000s. Asus, what are you doing? So, I don't know. Like, they have a BIOS skin from 2005 on a flagship Threadripper board. And so you got no mouse support. It's like, yeah, I don't need the mouse, but I can use the keyboard arrow keys to navigate through the. I usually do that anyway, but it's like if someone was familiar with using the mouse to point and click in the BIOS, they can't do that on this Sage. Nope, you got to use the keyboard. And good luck trying to program your fan profile without a mouse, because that's a pain. I got used to it because I had to do it a couple times after some BIOS updates, but yeah. So things like a BIOS from 2005, Thunderbolt 4 not working correctly, but now I know the reason. It's because they want to sell me this instead. So stuff like that is what's making me want to go back to Gigabyte. But I don't know. I might be able to live with it. Assuming I can get my USB4 card working correctly. But I've gotten used to having all these PCIe slots, so it's kind of hard for me to switch back now. Because I've got the GPU up here, I've got the capture card in this one, I have the Thunderbolt card in this one, but I'm about to pull that out and return it. And then I have the Intel A770 down here at the very bottom. So I'm running dual GPUs, plus a capture card, plus a Thunderbolt card. And soon I won't have that Thunderbolt card. Eventually there'll be a USB card or USB4 card. So being able to have all that connectivity. And once I get USB4 working correctly, technically I don't need the internal capture card, because I can just use the external Thunderbolt capture card with USB4. So that'll free up the third slot so I can run like an NVMe add-in card or a sound card. Like everybody keeps talking about sound cards. I can put a sound card in there. So trade in for the ASRock motherboard so you can say that you used them all. You know what's funny? My local Micro Center actually has the ASRock board in stock. So I could technically do that. I could go and take this Asus board back to the store. It's like, no, this one, I mean, it has some problems. I need to swap to the ASRock motherboard. So they've got all three. I mean, well, they don't have the Asus one right now. So like if I were to take this back and do an exchange, I could only exchange for either ASRock or Gigabyte. They don't have another Sage available. I like the layout of the Gigabyte one. If you go that route, a USB4 card, you could probably go the route of external sound card DAC. Oh yeah, you're right, Nero. Yeah, the other thing too, the nice thing about Gigabyte though, so see, Gigabyte looks like it only has 3 PCI slots, but here's the thing. All 3 of these slots are full X16. The first and the second one are Gen 5 X16. The bottom one is Gen 4 X16. So no matter what you plug in, you could potentially plug in anything that uses 16 lanes. Now, Asus, the Sage, it's 16, 16, 8, 4, 16. So, but keep in mind, with Gigabyte already has USB4 on the back. So both of these USB-C ports are actual 40 gigabit USB4. So you can think of it like, okay, well, if Gigabyte didn't include USB4, they would have given you another X4 PCIe slot. They would have given you back those 4 lanes that they hardwired internally to USB4. So that's the reason why it doesn't have that 4th slot, because they already gave you the USB 4. Whereas with Asus, it's like, okay, you want USB 4? Okay, you got to spend more money, buy the card and all the cables, and hopefully it works. Because, I mean, I tried the Thunderbolt one, and that was a big waste of money. So that's going right back. Because this was a waste of my time and a waste of money. It's just going in circles with these guys, trying to figure out how to get USB 4 to work. And then finding out, oh, you guys just announced literally earlier today that you have a USB 4 card. So yeah, that was annoying. So, and the thing about Asus is they force you to plug the USB card into the 5th or the 4th slot. You cannot put it anywhere else. So, yeah, it kind of restricts you to where it goes. So imagine if they had it integrated, they would not have this 4th slot. It would just be gone. It just wouldn't be here if they gave you USB 4 on the back. So, I really think Asus wasted a lot of, like, both Asus and ASRock are very dumb in my opinion, because they wasted so much space on the dual power supply feature. Like, who is actually going to overclock Threadripper to the point where they actually need the second power supply? Like, is anyone actually going to do that? Is anyone really going to spend like $1,500 minimum on a processor and overclock it to the point where it actually needs a second power supply? To me, that is the biggest waste of motherboard real estate I have ever seen. Both ASRock and Asus support dual power supply. Now it's optional because I'm using this board and I'm definitely not using 2 power supplies. I can tell you that right now. Yeah, it's like, I don't know, what do they think people are going to mine crypto on this thing? This is a big waste of money if they want to mine crypto, because they can just buy like the cheapest Intel or AMD board, put the cheapest Ryzen 3 or Intel i3 or even like an Intel Pentium for that matter in there, and then they just plug in all those GPUs via those riser cards or those riser cables. So it's like, yeah, this is not a thing for like crypto. I don't know why they put dual power supplies capability on this board. I think it's just a waste of space. Because I'll tell you what annoys me about the Sage. Here's another thing that annoys me about the Sage. They put the debug at the very bottom of the board. Now, at first I thought, okay, that's fine. Until I installed the Intel A770 in the very bottom slot, because it's X16 bandwidth down there. And as soon as I plug that in, I can't see the postcode anymore. I mean, not that it really matters too much once you have all your RAM settings and everything set up. But it's like, yeah, I would have liked it if that postcode was up in the top left or the top right. Or somewhere over here where it's easier for me to see. Just stupid things like that. Because it's like Gigabyte did it correctly. They put it up here on the upper right hand corner of the motherboard. But Asus had to put it down there because they were dumb, and they put like another 24 pin plus another 8-pin EPS 12 volt. They like waste all this space for something that no one's going to use. Like, literally, not that many people are going to use Threadripper in the first place. It's a niche of a niche. Like, this dual power supply on Threadripper, it's like your demographic for Threadripper is already probably like less than 1% of the desktop market. So now you put a niche feature on a niche demographic user base, aka dual power supply capability. It's like, who is actually using that? Like, less than 1% of the desktop user base is actually going to make use of that. So, it's only for server implementation. Yeah, and for that they have a different board though. And you know, somebody from Asus support actually tried to tell me, like, when I told them I can't get USB 4 working with the Thunderbolt card, they're like, this is a server product. Why do you need Thunderbolt? And I'm like, this is not because it says it's a workstation. It says it's a workstation? Like, where's the word server in this thing? And they're trying to tell me it's a server product. It has dual power supplies. They're asking me stupid questions like, did you plug the PCIe 6-pin adapter in for the motherboard, and I'm like, no, because I'm not using the second power supply. And then there's a moment of silence, and then they're like, okay, did you plug the 6-pin down here, the supplemental power from the PCIe 6-pin to the motherboard for your PCIe slots? And I'm like, no, because I'm not running like 6 graphics cards. So they're like, it's a server product. They keep telling me it's a server product. I'm like, this is not a server product. It's like, this is a desktop. This is a workstation motherboard. Workstation does not mean server. Like, I don't need a KVM to operate this computer. Like, that's not how it works, you know? Like, no. So at least Gigabyte understood what this is actually supposed to be for. So, I don't know. Because I went back and forth with Gigabyte on the whole, like, I can't put my computer to sleep. It says S3 sleep is not available in the command line, and there's nowhere for me to turn it on in the BIOS. And then they're like, well, we need to RMA the motherboard then. And I'm like, why do we need to RMA the motherboard when everything works fine? I just can't put the computer to sleep. So, well, now I know, per some random guy on Reddit, that Rev 1.1 has sleep and Rev 1.0 does not. So for anybody who is used to putting their computer to sleep at night, and they are thinking of going to Threadripper, and they're thinking of going with the Gigabyte board because that's actually the most practical option, avoid the Rev 1.0 like the plague. Go for a Rev 1.1 or a Rev 1.2. Those are the ones to get. Don't get the Rev 1.0. That is my word of advice, words of wisdom, as the guinea pig, as the early adopter for this platform. I can tell you, do not buy the Rev 1.0 Aero D from Gigabyte if you want to put your computer to sleep. Otherwise, if you have Rev 1.0, your only options are shut down or hibernate. That's all you can do. So, yeah. Otherwise, I mean, this board, technically, it's the best one in my mind. It's the cheapest one. It gives you what you actually need and what you'll actually use. It includes USB4. You don't have to pay extra for USB4. So, man, like, the Gigabyte board, that was the way to go for most people. But I don't know. Maybe I'll trade back to Gigabyte. We'll see. I got to figure out some stuff from Asus, though. I need to get confirmation from them on when this will come out. And they need to answer 100% that this will work on their Threadripper Sage board. Because it's like, I'm not going to go through purchasing one of these and then running into the exact same problem that I had with the Thunderbolt card. So, because they're like, okay, well, they can get away. They can basically escape me by saying, oh, it's not officially supported because it's Thunderbolt and you're on an AMD thing. Okay, I'll accept that. But if I purchase this, it better work, because you guys can't run away and tell me that this doesn't work when you literally have the header on your motherboard. So hopefully that solves the problem. Asus has that habit of releasing a worse version of a motherboard than coming out later with a better one. Oh man, I hope that's not the case. I'm gonna be so mad if like 4 months from now, if they announce like the Sage Plus or something. You know, I'm gonna be so irritated at them because this is like, yeah. I mean, if it wasn't for Rev 1.0 not having sleep, I would have never switched from Gigabyte. I would have stayed with the Aero D. And I mean, I'm considering maybe going back to it if I can confirm like Micro Center has a Rev 1.1 or a Rev 1.2, because I don't want to deal with like buying a Rev 1.0 and then RMA, and then I have to ship them my board, and then I don't have the computer for like 2-3 weeks. It's like, no, man. No. Sage Ultra with 3 PSU connectors. Yeah, if they do that, if they do something dumb like that, I will never buy an Asus motherboard ever again. If they're that stupid and that they release like a better one that actually has a modern BIOS, not some 2005 looking blue and gray like UEFI thing with no mouse support, and because trust me, like you guys, like if you've ever done your fan profile in a BIOS, you know you use the mouse when you tune your fans. Imagine having to do Smart Fan in the BIOS without the mouse. Imagine doing that. I challenge you guys. I challenge you. Next time you go do your fan profiles, if you update your BIOS, you got to go reset your fan profiles. Try to set your fan profiles in the BIOS without once ever touching the mouse. Because you have to do that on the Sage. You have to do that on the Sage. You don't have the mouse at all in the Sage BIOS. Imagine the difficulties. Happened to me with the B550. Then they released the B550 with more USB-C 3. I don't know who from Asus thought it was a good idea to launch a super expensive flagship Sage, whatever they want to call it, Threadripper board. Because this thing, you know how much money this motherboard? This is a $900 motherboard. $900 motherboard. They don't even have a UEFI that supports a mouse. Like, how dumb can you be to sell a $900 motherboard with no mouse support in your UEFI in 2024? Like, seriously. Seriously. I don't know, man. I don't know what product manager thought that was a good idea to sign off on that. Clearly they need another role at the company, or they just basically need to be in the next layoff wave, as far as I'm concerned. Because you don't release a $900 product and you like give it the most gimped looking BIOS imaginable. Even their like budget tough and prime, like their budget like, you know, sub $200 boards have a better UEFI than their $900 flagship. Like, something's clearly wrong with that. You know, like, that does not present well with their customers that actually bought this thing. Someone at Asus was nostalgic and shipped the motherboard with 2005. Maybe they thought it was more stable or something. I don't know. There's probably some excuse. Like, the excuse that I kept getting from the support people was that, oh, it's a server product. It's a server product. It's not that market segment. It's not that market segment. Okay, well, how come Gigabyte and ASRock can ship their Threadripper board with a proper UEFI skin and have full mouse support? Oh, and by the way, the Gigabyte board is $600. You're charging $900, and you don't even have the mouse capability in your BIOS, and these guys are like $300 cheaper. They include USB4. I don't have to waste money on a USB4 card. And it's still way cheaper. You know, like, clearly Asus needs to reevaluate how they do their design requirements. So, because ASRock also has a proper BIOS. Now, I haven't tested ASRock, but I've looked at their manual. I've seen the screenshots. And ASRock has the proper UEFI. ASRock has an option to put the computer to sleep, which Gigabyte's first revision didn't have. But, you know, like, ASRock does have it. ASRock has Thunderbolt support. ASRock has USB4 support via an add-in card. But, yeah, I mean, at least it's like, yeah, they're charging $700. So ASRock's $100 more than Gigabyte. But, at least they're giving you the things that you don't have to second guess. Am I going to get this or not? You know, like, I never thought that I would buy a $900 motherboard just to get into the BIOS and see, oh, this thing is like my very first computer from 2006. So that was a rude awakening. The other annoying thing about this board, the last thing, I'm going to quit ranting about this, I promise, but the very last thing that I will ding this board on, besides the fact that the stupid postcode is way at the bottom here, nowhere to plug in the buzzer. This $900 motherboard has nowhere on it to plug the speaker for the case. So there is no way to listen for the post beep. There's no beeping noise because you can't plug the speaker onto this motherboard. It does not have a speaker header. I can't believe it. $900, not even a speaker, a buzzer speaker, whatever you want to call it, for the postcodes. Like, nope. You can't see your postcode because you covered it up with an Intel GPU. So now you can't see your postcode debug numbers. Well, good luck, because you can't listen for the beep sound because there's nowhere to put the speaker on the board either. You know, like, this is the reason why I'm like, guys, you didn't need this dual PSU thing. Like, this is dumb. Like, this is really dumb. It doesn't feel like a properly thought out product. Too much emphasis on overclocking. Realistically, like, no one cares about overclocking on Threadripper. I'm just being honest. Like, you buy this as a workstation. You're not going to sit here and try to, like, overclock a Threadripper. Like, am I really going to overclock a $1,500 CPU? And that's, like, the cheapest Threadripper. Am I really going to do that? No, I'm not. So it's like, I don't need this dual PSU. Like, it's nonsense. Can you say at least 5 good things? Okay, I'll tell you 5 good things about it. Good PCIe slot count. Good PCIe slot layout. I actually like the layout of this motherboard's PCIe slots compared to ASRock. Because ASRock also gives you 5, but I think ASRock is kind of dumb in how they set them up. Like, they're not, like, the first 2 are too close together. You know, I think Asus did a better job with the layout of the PCIe slots. So that's one good thing. The other good thing about it is it has a toggle for, like, slow boot. So if you set your RAM, like, if you're trying to overclock RAM, or if you're going to set your RAM to, like, let's say you set your RAM to, let's say you have a 6400 kit, but you're trying to overclock it to, like, 8000 or, like, 7200 or 7800 or something. Like, you can slow boot, so it will, like, if it fails to train, you can press the slow boot button, get back in on the previous settings really quick without having to waste the copious amounts of time to do DDR5 training again. You know, so that's number 2. Number 3, I actually, once I was able to get the fan profiles tuned, I do like Asus's silent profile better than Gigabyte's. I think it's quieter than Gigabyte's, ever so slightly. So I really like their fan profile presets in the BIOS. That's a real pain to program them, but it's all in there. So that's number 3. Number 4. Yeah, now it's starting to run thin on terms of functionality. I guess the 4th thing that I would say is I like the way that they have the top PCIe slot, like, just underneath where the RAM would go. Like, you guys can see the RAM is here. Because on Gigabyte, there's this huge gap right here. See how the top slot is here and the RAM is, like, way up here? At first, I thought this was a bad thing for Asus, but after plugging in the 2 GPUs, I actually prefer it closer to the RAM because there's more separation from the top GPU and the other things underneath it, so you don't have to worry about starving the top GPU, which is typically the primary GPU, of air. So I think that the Asus board, because they put this higher up, they have more, there's more airflow, there's more optimal airflow for the graphics cards and the other peripherals that are going to go underneath. Now, at first I was a little bit afraid that maybe because it's so close to the RAM, I would not be able to fit the Noctua air cooler on here, but it fits fine. So I can get the Noctua air on here, I can get the GPU in the first slot, and there's good enough spacing. There's no problem. So that's number 4. I like that they put the slot immediately after the RAM, so there's none of this, like, this gap. Because I really don't know why the gap is needed. I feel like if Gigabyte moved this slot 1 unit higher up, you could fit a 4090 in the top slot and still have enough space for something in the second slot. The problem with Gigabyte's board is the top PCI slot is just too close to the second slot that you really can't go beyond like a 2.5 slot GPU. If you really want to use the second slot for like an NVMe card or another GPU or whatever. So, yeah, so Asus did better there. That's 4. Now, one more thing. Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to say. Like, I guess the fourth one would be... Oh, the fourth one would be that it has the clear CMOS on the back. The Gigabyte board doesn't have the clear CMOS on the back. For some reason, Gigabyte, in all their infinite wisdom, thought it was a good idea to put the clear CMOS way down here. The button is like way down here, which is okay, but the only annoying part about that is anytime you have to clear the CMOS, you have to open the case to get to the button. And in my case, I had an Intel GPU down here, and that GPU blocks access to the button. So that was annoying. So I like that Asus put the clear CMOS on the back. I really don't know why Gigabyte didn't do that. I think that is probably one of the dumbest things that Gigabyte did with their motherboard. But yeah, that's 5 things. So clear CMOS in the back. They maximize the space for the top GPU. I like the number of PCIe lanes or PCIe slots that they give you. And I can't remember what I said about the other stuff. Like, yeah. Oh, the fan profile. The fan presets in the BIOS. The silent profile is better than the Gigabyte one. So Gigabyte put a DP input there, but not a clear CMOS. Yeah, I know, right? Like, yeah. So both of them feature Wi-Fi 7. I mean, at least they both have Wi-Fi 7. ASRock has Wi-Fi 6E on their Threadripper board. Now, so I can see ASRock doing a revision and adding Wi-Fi 7 in the future. But I don't know, like, it's weird. Gigabyte already has, like, 2 revisions. That, to me, raises some eyebrows about the quality of the first one. So, I don't know. When I think about that, I'm like, okay, maybe it's not a bad thing that I swapped over to the Asus board. But, I mean, in the case of Asus, they literally just need to confirm for me that I can use this USB4 card, and then they're basically set. Then there's no reason for me to consider going back to the Gigabyte board. So, all right. Well, that's probably going to be it for this stream. We're going to do some content on that new AverMedia card whenever I can get one of those in. Definitely there'll be some more follow-up content on this USB4 scenario because, I mean, I need to get this situation resolved. The B650 Elite AX has 3 revisions already. Yeah, but remember, Max, the B650 is not that new. B650 was from like what, October of 2022? So that's more than a year old. This is only a few months old and it's already got 3 revisions, or like it's got 2 revisions. For a motherboard that's only been out since November, I mean, that's kind of, like, what's going on here? Like, that raises some concerns about the earlier revision. They already have a Rev 1.2. Now, the funny thing is, what I noticed is Rev 1.2 and 1.1 both have this FA BIOS from November. Both of them, Rev 1.1 and 1.2, have an FA BIOS. Rev 1.0 has a different BIOS. It has, I think, F2. Yeah, see? So the one that I had it actually came from the store with the F2 BIOS. I never had to do a BIOS update. So, because when I purchased this around, like, it was like a Black Friday deal or something. So it was like late November, see? and F2 was like November 14th. So I never had to update the BIOS. And what's funny is since then, the whole time I had the board, they never put out a new BIOS. Instead, they did these revision updates that have a different BIOS. Asus has been doing better when it comes to BIOS updates. Like, they already have, like, there's several BIOS updates. I've already updated the BIOS twice, actually, on this. And I've only had this since, like, I think the 5th. I think I got this on January 5th of this month. So I've only had it for, like, almost 2 weeks. And since then, you can see, like, Asus has been putting out BIOS updates. So the one that came from the store came with this second BIOS, 0402, which was November 30th of last year. So I never had the first BIOS, but I had this one. So I updated it to 0502 because when I opened the case and I'm talking about, oh, I can't get PCI tunneling to work, they told me, oh, update the BIOS. I updated the BIOS, it didn't fix anything. So recently I updated to 0607, which was from January 9th, and it still didn't fix anything. So, I mean, yeah, it's whatever. There also was a BIOS update for the 20 gigabit USB on the back, which I did that, and I haven't noticed any difference, but yeah. How do you know what revision you're buying when shopping for these? It should be on the box. So anytime you buy a motherboard... See, okay, this is the reason why I really like Micro Center. This is the like, if you're buying from online, like if you're buying from Newegg or Amazon, good luck, there's no way to know. It's literally a dice roll. You're literally gambling. You have no idea what you're gonna get. But if you, like when you go to the store, I go to the sales guy and I literally say, I'll tell him, like if I'm gonna swap back to Gigabyte, for example, I'll tell him, hey, do you know if you have Rev 1.1 or 1.2 of the TRX50 Aero D? Because if you don't have one, I'm not gonna get the motherboard. It's that simple. So they'll have to go back and check their inventory and see if they actually have the newer one. So that's what I would do. But yeah, that's the reason why Micro Center is like the real deal. It's the secret sauce when it comes to making sure you get exactly what you want and not this like random chance. Because the one guy on Reddit that was able to confirm that Rev 1.1 had sleep, S3 sleep, he said in there that he kept returning the board until he got one that had Rev 1.1. Now that, to me, you can't keep doing that, because at some point I think the e-tailer, assuming he was buying it from Newegg or somebody, is probably going to clamp down on that. It's like, you can't keep on sending these back, man. There's nothing wrong with these boards. So, but he did like, I think 2 returns until he finally got one that was Rev 1.1. But yeah, like in my case, I'd have to go to Micro Center. It's unfortunate that these sort of things happen, though. Like, who makes a motherboard in 2023 or 2024 that doesn't have the ability to put the computer to sleep? Like, to me, that's just stupid on Gigabyte's part. Like, that's just straight up failing on on a whole nother level. Like, you create a $600 motherboard that you can't put to sleep. Like, really? How did that get past like a lot of different phases of development? Like, who signed off on that? I don't know what's worse. Well, okay, I consider that worse. Obviously, that's why I returned the board. But that is worse than Asus thinking that, oh, I have nostalgia for a 2005 BIOS skin, so I'm just going to make the BIOS have the default 2005 skin. Like, that is borderline unacceptable, but at least it's functional. So it definitely doesn't speak well of the product, but it works. So, The Gigabyte motherboard can't sleep. The Asus has a 2005. I don't know what flaw the... Oh, I'll tell you what flaw the ASRock one has. I already know. There's a reason why I avoided the ASRock one. Uh, I'll tell you what the ASRock one can't do. And then that's where we'll end the stream. ASRock TRX50 WS. Okay. So the ASRock motherboard. So this motherboard, just like Asus, they did the whole like dual power supply stupidity. So they have the dual power supply capability, just like Asus. They're $200 cheaper than Asus because Gigabyte 600, ASRock is 700, Asus is 900. So they're cheaper. I'll tell you the things about them that are not that great. So, number one, assuming their website will actually load the picture, because sometimes they don't load the picture properly. Okay, can we find a picture of the back? Okay, number one problem with the ASRock board. Okay, first thing that's cool, they have the clear CMOS on the back, just like Asus. They don't fail like Gigabyte with the clear CMOS missing from the back. So they've got clear CMOS, but here's the problem. 2, 4, 6. Only 6 USB Type A. And I like how they have all this, they spaced all these out. They literally like spread them out to make it look like it's not that bare bones. That's funny. They have 6 USB Type A. Both Gigabyte and Asus have 8. So ASRock only has 6. And if you're me, if you're someone like me, you're going to easily fill up like 5, 6 USB ports on the back, like Type A USB ports, like instantly. I can tell you guys right now. So I'll just count like what I'm using. I've got my microphone, Elgato Wave 3. That's using a USB port. My keyboard's using a USB port. That's 2. My mouse, that's 3. The webcam, that's 4. The Elgato capture card, that's 5. My Xbox Series X controller, that's 6. That's 6. I'm already at 6 USB Type A. Do you understand? I'm already at the limit of what ASRock is offering. Immediately, I'm already maxed out on 6 USB. Now, what else? VR headset. VR headset needs a USB 3 port. That's another one. That would put me over 6. That would put me at 7 USB ports. Because the VR headset needs a USB 3 port. So, bam, that's already 7 right there. Can't you Bluetooth the controller? Yeah, but I don't like to waste time with the batteries. See, like I just run this thing with no batteries. Where's the... I always run it with no batteries. I've never put batteries in my Xbox controller. So it's like I don't waste time with the batteries. So I always perpetually have it plugged in. So that's why. I just have it wired. I hate wireless. I hate wireless stuff because of the batteries. Like I want to just not have to think about, oh, the batteries are running low, you know? So I have a wired mouse. I have a wired keyboard. Wired everything, you know? Like none of this stuff. So basically, look, I'm already at like... Counting the VR headset, I'm already at 7 Type A USB ports. So technically, ASRock already is not meeting my minimum Type A requirement. That's like ding number 1 for ASRock. Not enough USB Type A. Now, technically, I could use a USB-C to USB-A cable. I could do that because they do give you a 10 gigabit USB-C and a 20 gigabit USB-C. That is technically better than Asus because Asus... Where's Asus? Let me go back here. Asus gives you Asus gives you a total of one 20 gigabit USB-C. One 20 gigabit USB-C. But at least they give me 8. Now, granted, 2 of them are the really old school 2.0, but at least it's 8. I mean, I can live with that because the mouse and the keyboard immediately go in there. Who cares? So, like that's whatever, right? So, but the fact that it's 8 Type A plus 120 gigabit USB-C versus, oh, and I have optical audio on this too. This has optical audio, unlike Gigabyte. And let's go back to ASRock. ASRock had, come back here, or actually, is this picture going to work now? Oh, there we go. Okay, there we go. ASRock has optical audio, just like Asus. All three of them give you a 10 gigabit and a 2.5 gigabit. That's standard on all 3 motherboards. But look, only 6 Type A. They give you a 20 gigabit, just like Asus, but they do give you a 10 gigabit USB-C, which could, some might be willing to trade 2 USB 2.0 Type A for a single 10 gigabit USB-C. I personally don't really want to do that because I already listed off all the devices that I plug in. So, the other thing too is, even though this doesn't really matter too much, ASRock only has Wi-Fi 6E on their motherboard, whereas Gigabyte and Asus are Wi-Fi 7. So the fact that they're not using the latest and greatest on a Threadripper workstation product is kind of disappointing. So these are the setbacks. You guys wanted me to criticize ASRock? Well, here you go. Not enough Type A USB and Wi-Fi 6E when the competition is offering Wi-Fi 7. Even if that doesn't really matter, it's like, why is it a thing, right? Like, why are they not on Wi-Fi 7? To me, that's weird. It's like cost cutting for no reason. I mean, it's still $100 more than Gigabyte, and Gigabyte has Wi-Fi 7. Oh, and Gigabyte has 40 gigabit USB. Both of the USB-C ports on Gigabyte are USB4, which are superior to both ASRock and Asus in that regard. And I will also add that Gigabyte's USB4 is offering full PCIe tunneling, so you can use Thunderbolt 3 and Thunderbolt 4 devices with Gigabyte's USB4. I personally have tested an AverMedia Live Gamer Bolt, which requires Thunderbolt 3, and it works totally fine with the Gigabyte 40 gigabit or the USB4 ports. So anyway, so that's number 1 or number 1 and 2. So no Wi-Fi 7, not enough Type A on the back. Okay, here's the thing that people are going to also be scratching their heads at, why you do this, ASRock. Look, they have, on a $700 motherboard, they allow a grand total of, yes, you got that right, 2 NVMe drives. You can natively install a whopping total of 2 NVMe drives on this motherboard natively. If you want more than 2 NVMe or M.2, you have to use Slim SAS. So they give you 2 Slim SAS and this really strange VFIO or no, not VI, MCIO connector, which can be used for Gen 5 connectivity of some sort. And then Slim SAS can be used for additional NVMe. Think of it kind of like U.2 for storage. But the problem is, any sort of time you have to run a cable for an NVMe drive, all that does is drive the cost up. Because if you look up Slim SAS drives, those things are not cheap. Those are definitely like enterprise class hardware. So it's going to be very expensive. So it's like, yeah, ASRock, it's nice to have Slim SAS, but at the cost of gimping on the number of native M.2 drives that you can install. To me, that's kind of a deal breaker because, like, why should I have to be forced into spending more money on a slim SAS solution for storage when you could have just given me more M.2 drives, like on the board. You know, like that's kind of dumb. So, yeah, I think that's a huge oversight. It's like they want these things to have all these enterprise features, but I feel like that's something you do on the flagship WRX 90, which is meant to go with Threadripper Pro CPUs. For something like this, which is supposed to be for HEDT, high-end desktop, this is more like a happy medium between full-on workstation and actual high-end desktop. So I feel like they kind of missed the mark in terms of the actual target user. Because if someone wanted to use Slim SAS and MCIO, all this fancy enterprise stuff, they would probably just go for the WRX 90 and ignore the TRX 50. So it's kind of dumb that they did it this way. Asus also gives you a Slim SAS. So you lose one of your 4 M.2s. So I guess I should have mentioned that earlier. The Sage from Asus allows a total of 3 M.2 drives. You got one here, you got one there, and one down there. The ASRock only has 2. You got one here, and you have one there. That's it. Gigabyte, which has the cheapest motherboard, gives you 4 M.2 drives. Just like all the other modern motherboards for X670, Z790, etc. So Gigabyte, I feel like they actually thought it through properly in terms of what people will actually want to use with these Threadripper processors. So again, they kind of missed the mark. Only having the ability to do 2 M.2 drives natively on a Threadripper board, to me, seems very counterintuitive. So that's mistake number 2 on ASRock's part. But other than that, other than the fact that you don't have that much M.2 native on the board. Now, granted, one might argue and say, oh, well, you can just plug in a bifurcated M.2 card in one of the PCI slots. Yes, I know you can do that. But if you do that, now you're taking up a slot that could have gone to a second GPU or, like a capture card or whatever. So it's like you're basically having to use the PCIe slots as a workaround to overcome what should have not been a limitation in the first place, as far as I'm concerned. So, yeah. So other than that, though, they put the postcode debug at the very top, like right above the RAM. Now, because I've never tested the board, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Having the debug code, like right up here in the middle, to me is a little bit bizarre, because if you have a large air cooler, you could very well obscure this and not be able to see it at all. So yeah, I personally would have put this postcode thing over on the right. I think Gigabyte is the only one that got it right in terms of the placement. That being said, ASRock supports Thunderbolt add-in cards via the 5-pin header, so you can use their Thunderbolt card on this board and it will work correctly. Unlike Asus, ASRock won't lock it down. So, yeah. Bluetooth headset has flawless Bluetooth. If everything was like that. Yeah, I mean, if everything was like that, right? But that's the key word. If it was like that. And that's not the reality, unfortunately. All these motherboards have some weird, wacky decisions. Yeah, I know. And that's exactly why it's very... It leaves a lot to be desired. And the problem is Threadripper is already kind of a niche. So when you're looking at a niche product, your options are so limited like this. Like, you literally only have 3 motherboards to choose from. All of them are extremely expensive. And all 3 of them have some strange decision that doesn't really make any sense as to why they have these design decisions. So, like, Asus with the 2005 BIOS, like locking out Thunderbolt artificially when the others don't. Um, that kind of stuff. You know, poor placement of the postcode, whatever. You know, it's annoying. ASRock, only 2 M.2s, not enough USB on the back. You know, questionable choices. Like, why is there so much Slim SAS on here? Like, I don't understand that. And then Gigabyte, the only thing Gigabyte's missing, like, why is the clear CMOS not on the back? There's no optical audio on the back. The other two have it. I don't know why Gigabyte doesn't have it. But other than that, Gigabyte, honestly, Gigabyte actually, as far as I'm concerned, has the best product. And that's ultimately why I chose them originally. Lowest price, 4 M.2, 8 SATA. Oh, that's the other thing too. Gigabyte has 8 SATA ports. You got 4 up here, and you have 4 down here. So you can do 8 traditional SATA drives, plus 4 M.2. These other guys only do 4 SATA. 4 SATA here, 2 M.2. Asus is 4 SATA and 3 M.2. Now, ASRock and Asus will be like, well, hold on a second, because we're giving you Slim SAS. It's like, okay, but realistically, I'm never going to use Slim SAS, so I don't see that as a positive. So anyway, that's enough complaining about these boards. I think I'll be able to live with my Asus board. I just need to figure out the whole USB4 situation from Asus. But I think once I get that figured out, I think it should be smooth sailing for the most part. I do think Asus has done the best job in terms of releasing BIOS updates regularly. Gigabyte never did any BIOS updates, which is very questionable. Although maybe it's so good that they didn't need BIOS updates, you know. So although they have 3 revisions, so I don't know. And then ASRock, I haven't tested them. They have a total of, okay, so they have, well, they're basically like Gigabyte. They have like 2 BIOSes total. So I don't know. They're kind of like in the middle. So yeah, that's gonna be it for this live stream. Hope you guys learned something. When you're going to buy a motherboard, make sure you do your research. Make sure you research all your options. That's why I did that tier list video. There's no reason for me to do a tier list video with Threadripper. There's only 3 boards. That would be kind of hilarious. I can rank them right now. Technically, Gigabyte's still the best one. So Gigabyte, if I had to grade them, Gigabyte's first place for the Threadripper board. Asus is second, although it's a distant second, and then like ASRock is the worst one because ASRock, I think, missed the mark in terms of like what the actual end user is going to do with this Threadripper motherboard. Like, they don't need that much Slim SAS, they don't need that MCIO, although who knows, maybe there'll be some magical thing that it can use someday that everybody needs. But not enough M.2, not enough USB. To me, those are like straight up deal breakers for my use case. And then it's also missing Wi-Fi 7 for some strange reason. So anyway, that's how I grade them. Gigabyte's is the best, Asus's one's in the middle, and ASRock's one is the worst, technically. At least from me. For others, it might be completely different. Some people might actually use Slim SAS, and they might be more enterprise focused. They might grade them in the reverse order, and they consider Gigabyte's as the worst one. But anyway, that's going to be it for this stream. Hope you guys found something useful from here, and I will catch you guys next week, same time, same place. If you're new to the channel, if you like this type of in-depth content on things that are often never really talked about in other tech channels, like USB4, like capture card stuff and that kind of thing, and the ins and outs of motherboards, then get subscribed to the channel. It does motivate me to keep making these type of videos. But as always, I will see you guys next Thursday. And until then, take care, and I will catch you in the next one. Thanks.